Cultfigga TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Army of Revolution, and I have a World War III alert. We got a World War III alert, but first be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know cultfigga Live. We got late night revolutionary classes, y'all. Late night revolutionary classes. We won't be distracted by what's going on. We know World War III is very serious. We got to see what's going on. Benjamin Netanyahu want to kill us all. He has attacked a Russian base, and Putin has warned Russians to leave Israel as soon as possible. What is going to happen next? You see, Benjamin Netanyahu want to pull all of us into his demise, you know? And the best way for him to die quick is to attack Russia.
Several local Middle East media outlets reported an explosion at the Russian Hmeimim air base in the western coast of Syria near Jabla. This was the result of an Israeli Navy attack, not an Air Force attack near the air base, sources reported today on October 3, 2024. The target and perpetrators have not been officially confirmed, but local sources spoke of the possibility of a Russian ammunition depot, one of several that were targeted. Both Syrian and Russian air defenses were active, but a missile escaped, causing the explosion at night.
Putin gonna make them pay?
Rumors are circulating that warehouses inside Hmeimim were attacked shortly after the Iranian cargo arrived at the base. It is known that the Syrian opposition does not have the ability.
Israel attacks Syria all the time, but that is a Russian base. That is Russia's main base in Syria that Israel attacked today. Said that some cargo had been shipped there for the Iranians shipped something there, which who cares? Iran can ship whatever they want there. Probably some high-tech weapons was going to Hezbollah, but Israel didn't cross the red line, and Putin didn't warn. See, once Putin warned his citizens to leave Israel, then everybody know what's happening. Why you think he don't want his citizens in Israel? Because whatever gonna happen, he don't want them getting hit.
To do such things. Currently, Zionist forces are carrying out massive bombings in Syria. More than 50 missiles were launched in Latakia, Jabla, and Tartus regions, including some hitting the Hmeimim air base, where the Russian aerospace forces operate, actively participating with the Syrian Arab Army to fight the enemy aggressor in their illusions of toppling the Assad government. If proven, Zionists are playing with fire and will eventually get burned, something that has been on the minds of the experts. However, indications seem to be clear that Russia has advised its citizens to leave Israel immediately following the attack. The Russian ambassador in Tel Aviv highlighted,
once Putin understands, oh, Netanyahu, you want to die? Okay. And once they come on TV and say we need all of the Russian citizens to leave Israel, everybody know what time it is. Once he tell my citizens to evacuate your country, it's bad news for them to beat you home, bro.
The escalation in the region and urged its 1.5 million citizens to take advantage of the evacuation opportunity. Anatoly Viktorov urged Russians to get out of Israel before it is too late. Leave while you still can, Viktorov said. Russia has also begun evacuating its citizens from Lebanon. It is strongly suspected that something big is about to happen.
Аэропорт Тель-Авивский международный работает в штатном режиме. Ну, если есть такая возможность, я бы посоветовал подумать над тем, чтобы временно выехать на территорию России или какие-то другие страны.
this one. Where is that at? Alright, so we're going to check into that.
Like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give.
You don't need to. Alright, this one I was looking for.
Overnight, we've had confirmation, as if we needed it really, that Israel absolutely does not want a ceasefire. It's now beyond doubt, because not only is Benjamin Netanyahu a dishonest broker in any ceasefire attempts, but he's been prepared to use deadly force, it seems, not only to block any progress towards peace, but to further antagonize the world to widen the war he's determined to keep going. Netanyahu's lies have been exposed to fatal effect in order to specifically wreck any notions of peace. And where we might have been expecting that Israeli response to the Iranian airstrike on Sunday night, they have instead chosen different targets entirely to focus last night's aggression on. And in another desperate play by Netanyahu to drag another player into the war, he is insisting on driving the Middle East towards, and possibly much further afield as well. He is a deranged madman. And as much as I'll always advocate for the diplomatic and negotiated solution, I struggle to see how Israel can be stopped when it is led by a guy for whom peace appears to mean the same as failure, and whose position is dependent on keeping the violence going.
Are you saying Hassan Nasrallah had agreed to a ceasefire just moments before he was assassinated?
He agreed. Yes. We agreed completely. Lebanon agreed to ceasefire, but consulting with the Hezbollah, the speaker, Mr. Berry, consulted with Hezbollah, and we informed the Americans and the French that what happened. And they told us that Mr. Netanyahu also agreed on the statement that was issued by both presidents.
Okay, well,
right, so that was a short clip there featuring Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdallah Rashid Bohabib speaking last night on PBS to Christiane Amanpour. And he dropped one hell of a bombshell there, because he just sat there and told Amanpour that assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah had agreed to a 21-day ceasefire that had been brokered by France and the US, and he alleged was also agreed to by Benjamin Netanyahu as well. That is what Bohabib claims Lebanon was told by the US and France, only for Israel to then launch the attack it did, which killed Nasrallah, along with some 2,000 Lebanese civilians living in the 6 tower blocks Israel leveled in order to get to him. That's the value of Israel's promises, of Israel's word, of its commitment to achieving peace. They don't want anything of the sort. Now take that knowledge and cast your mind back to July, when Israel also assassinated Hamas's negotiator Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, partly the reason for the Iranian attack on Israel's military installations on Tuesday night. The pragmatist in the Hamas leadership, as he was regarded as, the guy who tempered the more firebrand Yahya Sinwar, who now leads Hamas without that negotiator's influence, the guy who was also suing for peace. That's 2 peace negotiators Israel has swept off the table. Attacking another sovereign state, even as our rubbish here in the UK continue to kiss Israel's backside, along with our politicians, claiming the attack by Iran was unprovoked, making out that Iran is some kind of warlike nation, when actually Iran haven't deliberately started war themselves for literally hundreds of years now. And Israel are currently waging war on 8 fronts and have certainly fired on at least 5 other nations in just the last few months. This isn't a nation looking for peace. It's a nation that is looking for war and to keep war going. And it doesn't take a genius to see it, nor condemn those supporting them for not supporting a peaceful solution. If they are still deluding themselves in that, then they are mugs. But the wider consensus is that that our politicians have been bought and paid for to shield for Israel like they are. And therefore, despite their atrocities which never get condemned, they support the war and aggression they are conducting instead. You only had to look at Keir Starmer rushing to a podium to condemn Iran to see that, when he's never anywhere to be seen to condemn Israel. Literally on the same day Iran retaliated, Israel bombed out an orphanage in Gaza. Little kids were their target, deliberate target, and our leaders are supporting that by their omission. Starmer never mentioned it. Utterly inhuman to not be shocked and appalled and sickened at such a move. But it's Israel all over, or the government of Netanyahu at any rate. Iran's targets that they were all condemned for were all military, just as they were only targeting military sites when they attacked or retaliated against Israel back in April, the first time Iran had ever struck Israel. And again, that was a retaliation for Israel bombing their embassy in Damascus, the Syrian capital, which segues on to the other incident I need to bring up. Because last night, despite having been hit by Iran the night before, despite desperately trying to get across the Lebanese border at multiple points yesterday as well, and apparently getting no more than about 100 meters before getting turned back by Hezbollah, Israel decided to take aim at Syria once again, but not before dropping chemical weapons, white phosphorus, illegal to use in civilian areas, as we should all know by now, on the city of Beirut, throwing a tantrum and throwing weapons around illegally yet again. But again, this is Israel. What kind of country is attacking so many nations all in one go, and we're supposed to believe they want peace? Our leaders have lost this argument already, yet still stand at podiums and bleat otherwise. But the attack on Syria wasn't just an attack on Syria, because this time Israel targeted an arms depot, warehouses, at the Khmeimim military base near Jableh and Latakia in Syria, which isn't a Syrian airbase. It's a Russian one. Israel have now poked the bear. They've made a direct attack on ostensibly Russian property, Russian territory. Here's an excerpt from the Bulgarian military news site covering this. According to Syrian TV sources, an Israeli airstrike targeted a warehouse at the Russian Khmeimim base. The bombing also hit various military spots in Latakia province, aligning with the assault on the warehouse. It is reported that Israel launched the attack approximately 1 hour after an Iranian Qasem Fars Airlines plane touched down. Interestingly, the strike selectively avoided the runways and towers at the Latakia airfield, launching 30 missiles at 3:55 a.m. from naval warships, which triggered efforts to extinguish the resulting fire. Following the Israeli bombardment, a Russian air patrol was observed over Latakia skies. Meanwhile, the Times of Israel conveyed a cautious note on the incident, employing terms like allegedly rather than confirming the strike directly. The paper mentioned that a weapons depot near the coastal city of Latakia was purportedly hit during the nighttime, citing pro-government Sham FM radio reports that Syrian air defenses engaged targets over the sea in the area. According to the station, firefighters were busy combating a blaze in Jableh, located south of Latakia, which opposition media identified as a weapons depot. Shared footage on social media highlighted the aftermath of the attack on weapons reportedly routed through Syria from Iran, destined for Hezbollah in Lebanon, as reported by Emmanuel Fabian for the Israeli Resource. This is the first time Israel have ever targeted a Russian military base, a Russian anything, in fact, and they did it in order to take out a cache of what they believed were weapons destined for Hezbollah, stored in a warehouse or depot there. Thus far, at time of writing, I've not found any official response from Russia over this, but it can't be seen as anything other than another major escalation by the genocidal regime of Benjamin Netanyahu, and a desperation to expand their war as far as possible, and once again, talk of World War III arises.
Now, Russia's first response was to tell its citizens to leave Israel. You see, first you got to tell your citizens to leave before you get busy.
This will again give Western backers of the Israeli regime a massive headache, especially the US and UK, who have, of course, been asked repeatedly by Volodymyr Zelensky if he can bomb Russian air bases with our Storm Shadow long-range missiles, for example. He's been told no by the US, although Keir Starmer is more than happy to let Zelensky do this because he's a fool. And he'll be looking at what Israel have just done and no doubt be looking at the US and UK and say, well, if you're going to let Israel do it, why won't you let me do it and let Ukraine bomb Russia? The thing is, the US have, I'm sure, absolutely not given Israel the green light to strike Russia. They got green lit to strike Lebanon by Biden, as covered in a video I did yesterday, but not Russia, not a Russian base in Syria. But again, it ups the ante to such a degree again that Netanyahu will hope that this time he's done enough to get the US involved more proactively, because they have no control over him, especially if Russia now end up pledging a military response. I'm hoping that their issues in Ukraine, which continue to drag on, means Putin won't want to engage on another front directly, at least not at this point, though it may embolden him to provide arms to Hezbollah more overtly or directly, which would still be an escalation. Still something nobody who wants to see a peaceful resolution really wants to see happening. But again, it's Israel who you have to point the finger of blame at. It really is time the West got real. Netanyahu doesn't want peace. He is out of control and won't stop. And this is now beyond doubt. His hold on power depends on keeping this war going, spreading it further, because if he opts for peace, the hard right of his coalition government will pull out and collapse his government. That is his only priority, not hostages, not safety, not his country, not his people, just more war to keep his own far-right flank on board so he remains prime minister. No price is too high for him to pay to stay in power. The only way peace is coming, short of the US cutting arms supplies themselves off, which is just never going to happen, is via his removal as a starting point. Speaking of the US, of course, whilst they might not have greenlit a strike against Russia and cast a blind eye to assassination while pretending to be working towards a ceasefire, as Israel has also done, Biden's administration did apparently sign off on Israel invading Lebanon, though, of course, being Israel, it's a cross-border incursion. That's the language used in the media, isn't it? It's not an invasion. That word is reserved for Russia in regards to Ukraine, you see. And we can't compare Israel to Russia, can we? Couldn't possibly do that. Such is the double standard we've become used to from all of our politicians and mainstream media, though, isn't it? Check out that story in this video recommendation here.
Into the rebellion. I saw Shane the other day and when I was in Portland, and he said, "Hey, Clayton, I'm a rebel," and he wanted to Russia, not inside of Ukraine, at Russia. Time ago, the Ukrainians launched using U.S. weapons, attacked a nuclear power plant inside of Russia. Not inside of Ukraine at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant that was held by Russia. No, this is inside of Russia. Putin has responded. We are watching that. We're also watching Americans trying to get out of Lebanon right now.
Putin responded. I seen the video. I just got back to the house maybe 30, 40 minutes ago and then ran this live. So I haven't even got to look at all of what happened in Ukraine. But Ukraine did attack a nuclear power plant. And Putin did drop the biggest non-nuclear bomb in Ukraine as his response.
Over 7,000 Americans trapped in Lebanon, and the United States says get out now, but there's no flights. How are they going to get out? They're basically trapped as war is increasing and exploding at this hour in southern Lebanon. So watching all of those pieces today.
Plus, the Department of Homeland Security says that terrorists can exploit the open southern border. They don't have a plan to get past it. Also, they say Russia, China, and Iran are going to do bad things to us because of the southern border. They don't prove that.
Right.
They know that it's Mexican drug cartels, but this is basically a war.
Oh, Israel is going to do it. Israel is going to send terrorists across that border, and they're going to do all kind of shit and blame it on Russia or China or Iran. But it's going to happen.
Declaration document telling us what the problems are, not that they're going to fix it at all.
Also, we're getting new weird information on two fronts with President Trump. So President Trump warned us all last night that something was coming with Jack Smith, of course, the special counsel, the illegal special counsel prosecutor. Would there be some sort of October surprise? That happened. One judge's decision. And then we have a whole other judge deciding on the trial delay for the assassination attempt on President Trump, Ryan Routh. They say prosecutors have now uncovered a treasure trove of new evidence, and they want a delay because things have just gotten complex. The word complex is their word, not mine. So we're going to talk about that on today's show.
Plus, the far right won the vote in Austria. It's the Austria First Party, the party that actually wants the government to work for them because they have astronomical taxes. But the opposition says, well, we're not going to work with you because we don't want
of Lebanon. According to reports, they feel abandoned by the Biden administration as the U.S. is bracing for a wider war in Israel. Meanwhile, Iran just warned the United States a short time ago to stay out of this fight. Iran also telling the United States the restraints are off. Israel, meanwhile, for its part, is readying their...
Iran told the U.S. today that there is no more patience, no more sitting back, no more letting Israel or the U.S. get away with anything. So they told the United States, if you want to know what we're going to do to anything you do, we're going to fight.
Air response to Iran. And we're hearing reports this morning that Israeli IDF soldiers are being slaughtered in southern Lebanon in that attack. Is that attack backfiring right now? Let's make sense of all of this with Colonel Douglas Smith, the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice. A lot happening right now. Colonel, good to see you. First, you can take any one of these topics, but I think we need to start with what's happening in Lebanon and Americans trying to get out as we speak. Thousands of Americans trapped there.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, making sense out of any of this is a tall order, because the worse the situations get in these areas, the less coherence and the less rationality seems to play into all of this. The Ukrainians launched these missiles ostensibly as an act of desperation. You know, on the one hand, they don't care about Russian lives, and frankly, they don't care about the health of Europe. You destroy and potentially damage a nuclear power plant that has implications for a large region, a large part of the world. So it's a very dumb idea, but I think it is desperation. Now, the good news is the Russians report no radiation leaks, and others in the region who are monitoring it say they don't detect any radiation leaks. So that's good news. Second part is they say they've got it under control, they've secured it. The interesting part is that so many MLRS and ATACMS weapon systems, Army Tactical Missile System, rocket artillery, have been taken under fire and destroyed over the last several days by Iskander missiles. And those missiles are hypersonic. They carry a 1,500 to 1,800 pound warhead. They're very, very precise. That the whole region of eastern Ukraine has gone silent when it comes to these missiles. So I don't know what the missiles are, and it would be interesting to find out. I don't know if these are Shadows that were provided by the British or the French version called the Scout. Perhaps that's what hit the power plant. But it's very obvious that Ukraine is losing, and losing badly. The whole front is collapsing. The Russians are advancing deliberately because, of course, they have to be alert to mines and booby traps and things that may lie in their path. Large numbers of Ukrainian soldiers are surrendering. They are, of course, being treated well as always. They're actually calling the Russians once again and saying, hey, we're finished. We have nothing left. We're ready to surrender. So that part is good news. But what's really upsetting about this act of desperation is that it's designed, I am afraid, to do to us in Ukraine what Netanyahu is doing to us in the Middle East, and that is to drag in the United States and its allies into the war. Now, nothing bad happened per se, at least as far as we know from the Russian side. But I think we're going to see more of this in the near future. We're going to see it both in Ukraine and in Russia. And what has to happen right now in Ukraine is the president needs to shut down this regime. It's dangerous. This is a careless, irresponsible action that does not represent us, is not consistent with our views as a nation and as a people. That needs to be made clear to these people in Ukraine. And I think it's time to just shut them down. Say, we've had it with you. We're no longer going to support you. We're pulling out, because we don't want something like this to happen in the future and succeed.
So that's on the Russian front, and that's on what's just happened, this breaking news on this attack on this nuclear facility. Now let's turn to Lebanon, Colonel, where Americans trying to get out, upwards of 7,000 Americans trapped there who are trying to get out. The United States saying, yes, get out, but very difficult trying to get flights and trying to get these Americans out as Israel is expanding its war. This is not just a skirmish. We're hearing from the Israeli side that this is war. They are fully involved in a war in southern Lebanon at this hour. Where do things stand there before we talk about Iran? And the reports that I'm seeing this morning are showing, I'm seeing a lot, and you're not going to see this on Fox News. You're not going to see this on the major mainstream media. IDF soldiers coming up against heavy fire and being slaughtered in southern Lebanon. What's your sense of that?
Keep in mind that we do have a Marine Expeditionary Unit in the area, a total of almost 6,000 Marines. That MEU is normally an amphibious carrier, and they should be able to help evacuate people from Lebanon. Now, I don't know if that's being discussed or they've tasked the Marines to do something else, but normally I would think in such an emergency situation, that's why we maintain Marine expeditionary units in order to rescue American citizens from this kind of situation. I don't know what the likelihood is of flying out because I don't know who is willing to fly in and out of Lebanon. Remember, over the last few days, the Israelis have killed 7,000 people in and around Beirut. Not all of these people were associated, obviously, with Hezbollah, but that makes it very difficult for commercial airlines to fly in and pick people up. But it's a bad situation, and I don't know why we waited this long, because I think it's been pretty clear for some time now that Mr. Netanyahu was going to attack southern Lebanon. Now, as far as progress on the ground, we've got a huge problem right now, Clayton, with battle damage assessment of what actually is destroyed when explosives are used, when munitions are used, and also the casualty problem, because the Israelis have never told the truth about their losses. We've never had a clear picture of what's happened in Gaza. You have essentially a blackout for news of any kind about what happens on the front in Israel itself. They regard this as a national security matter. Fine. But the problem is when we say heavy losses, and I've been hearing the same thing from my sources, that in fact, when the special operations units went in first on the ground to try and quote unquote clear the way, they were unable to make very much progress. And in fact, many of them were severely wounded or killed. And then the troops that followed after them were subjected to the same kind of ambush tactics that the Israelis saw probably back in '82, only these may be actually worse depending upon the weapon systems they're using. But someone said to me, and this is now a day old, that 149 casualties had been taken by the Israelis. That may be true, and it may be now that it's up over 200. Have no idea. We know that the Israeli defense minister actually spoke to reporters who were asking about the ostensibly high number of Israeli casualties on the way into Lebanon. And he defended it by saying, no war in our history is as justified as this war that we're fighting now. And high losses are a cost of fighting this just war. Now, the last time the Israelis took something in the neighborhood of 2,000 plus casualties was in 1973 when they fought the Syrians and the Egyptians. I don't know what they're sustaining, but I suspect that if they haven't reached 2,000, they will shortly. Then you've got to also understand that Mr. Netanyahu has treated anyone who is not with him as a potential adversary. I know from some of the reports that I've seen that Russian bases were bombed by the Israeli Air Force in Syria.
Yeah,
in Syria,
you know, if you're
a missile depot was struck, yes, by the Israelis in Syria.
Yeah, and if you're trying to minimize the numbers of people who are against you, that's not a good way to do business. And so Putin has essentially sent a message to Netanyahu, get out of Lebanon. And the other group that we haven't even mentioned, of course, are the Turks, because 1 million people have already fled Lebanon. And guess where they go? They flee to Turkey. And the Turks already have 3-4 million refugees living in their country as a result of the Syrian war. Now they're going to get more from Lebanon, and the foreign minister said that's unacceptable to us. And I'm getting the impression that the Turks are nearing the point where they're prepared to intervene militarily if the IDF will not end its operations in Lebanon. I see no evidence that the Israelis are going to do anything unless they are compelled to do so by an opponent.
That's on the Lebanon side. We haven't even touched on Iran yet, the other part of this massive question. The Iranians, as I mentioned at the top, are telling the United States, stay out of this, and also that we are removing the restraints. The gloves are off, essentially. They don't want war, they're telling the United States, but the restraints are off, the gloves are off. What will the Israeli response be to Iran, and what do you think the Iranian response will be to Israel at this stage? And where does the United States fit into all of this?
Well, first, let's look at the Israeli position right now. They have not yet responded, which is interesting. I say it's interesting because if the Iranian strike was as light and essentially strategically irrelevant, as the Israelis claim, I'm surprised they haven't already launched some sort of retribution strike.
Israel has already started hacking satellite footages. I got some reports on that. They already start trying to cover up the damage, but people already got the damage of the base. Deep 30-foot craters. Iran blew up the planes like they said they did, but Israel was so embarrassed that they started hacking satellite, trying to put cloud cover to cover the bases because they know what happened to them.
Now, I don't have, again, the battle damage assessment. I'm not privileged. I don't get to go in and look at the satellite photography. I'm told that the strike that Iran launched of about 180 missiles, some of which were hypersonic, actually damaged airfields and aircraft. Now, there were some reports about having destroyed.
Just yesterday, Scott Ritter said no aircraft got hit. I know we like, nah, that's a lie. The Iranians told the truth. They hit the damn aircraft, man. Now they're coming on. It's good for this brother to do this. You was wrong yesterday. You was wrong. Iran told the truth. They said they blew up 20 F-35s. They absolutely blew up the 20 F-35s.
Destroyed or damaged F-35s. I have no way of knowing that. There were also claims that they'd hit F-16s. But the fact that the Israelis haven't responded very quickly, especially with their Air Force, does suggest that the Iranians must have had some impact in that area, because the Israelis are almost entirely dependent on the Air Force. In fact, that's one of the reasons the Iranians...
See, they coming to the realization. The airfield and the airplanes that Israel would use to do this attack on Iran bombed that airfield. They bombed some of those aircraft. Israel has to regroup. It'll take a little while for they can think about if somebody retaliates, it's going to be the U.S. pretending like it's the Israelis. Israel is hurting right now. Well, they doing a little damn. They bombing in Lebanon, and they attacked the Russian base trying to blow up some missiles for Iran. But that's next door to them. That's right next door.
Iranians have made it very clear they know where the aircraft are, and they're going to target them, because without close air support for the Israeli army on the ground, they're probably not going to get very far in Lebanon, and the Israelis know that. Now, what is Iran's response? Iran is simply saying, that's it. We've had it. The Iranians have been listening, as everybody in the Middle East has been listening, to Vladimir Putin and secondarily President Xi. And their counsel has been repeatedly, don't act rashly, exercise restraint. Don't give any reason for someone to go to war against you. And they've listened to this, and they've now concluded that this restraint hasn't worked. I'm sure you must have seen the reports that we, apparently through our representatives on the ground over there, told Hezbollah that we were ready for a negotiated ceasefire with Hezbollah. And that was one of the reasons that meeting was held. And of course, that meeting was identified, found, and targeted by our capabilities.
It was a trap.
Without our active participation, without our intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities, our electronic capabilities, the Israelis could not carry off something on the scale that you saw in Beirut recently against Hezbollah. So everybody knows that. I mean, it's not a secret. It may be a secret to the American people that we're that involved, but everybody else in the region knows it, and so does President Putin. And I think they've said now, that's it. We're not going to exercise any more restraint. And we have the capability to deliver punishing strikes. I've seen estimates that at least for 4 or 5 days, Iran could launch 100 missiles an hour. Again.
They can. They got hundreds of thousands of missiles. I'm hearing that tomorrow, and we're going to be covering that, the Supreme Leader Khomeini is supposed to be speaking on a new nuclear doctrine, that because he had made had decreed a fatah, meaning a holy decree, that they weren't going to have nuclear weapons. But now that the existence of Iran is on the line, the existence of his government and the revolutionary government of Iran is on the line, I'm hearing that he, like North Korea, they're going to announce that they are nuclear weapon state, and everything will change from now.
Against Israel. Now, I don't know if they'll do that, but that's a potential. We also know that the Israelis know, or the Iranians know where the Israelis will go. They are very suspicious of Cyprus, and that's why Erdogan has made comments about Cyprus. Don't try to use it as a launch pad against Hezbollah. If you do that, we'll become involved. We don't want Israeli aircraft in Cyprus. So I think that's one. There's another one, though, and that's Azerbaijan. People don't hear much about Azerbaijan in public, but Azerbaijan has been providing oil to the Israelis through Turkey. And Erdogan has allowed this oil to move without interruption into Israel. That could end very soon because the Turkish population is furious and wants it stopped. And I think the Azeri Turks, whatever their dislikes may be of Iran, are probably equally sensitive to this. But the Azerbaijanis, remember, were supported in their last war with Armenia by the Israelis. The Israelis actually helped the Azeris with unmanned aircraft, in other words, drones, to kill Armenians. That wasn't very popular in Russia. Russia has historically supported the Armenians, but the Armenian government has moved in this sort of globalist direction and made itself something of a puppet of Washington. But the Iranians know that the Israelis, if they want to, have been given license to go into Azerbaijan, where they can set up, they can refuel, and then launch strikes against Iran from Azerbaijan. I don't know what the plans will be, but I suspect that if that's under consideration and the Israelis try to do it, that Azerbaijan will be drawn into the war, unless, of course, Erdogan, who's very close with the Azeri Turks in Azerbaijan, intervenes to stop it. So there's a tinderbox now that is primed to explode. Every conceivable weapon you can imagine, up to nuclear weapons, is available to everybody. And those weapons are going to be used. And Israel is a very small country, and they've concentrated much of their population in the center of the country. The Israelis are going to take terrible losses. And this has always been my concern from the very beginning. And there's been a tendency to treat everyone in the region, Arabs, Turks, Persians, with contempt, as though they're some sort of backwater. There's no human capital. There's no sophistication. There's no technology. Well, that is wrong. And we're going to get an education the hard way very shortly. And I think it's going to be the death knell of Israel. That's how concerned I am. Now, the Israelis, of course, have nuclear weapons. Would they use it? I think there are circumstances under which, yes, they would use it. That should be of great concern to us.
With 10,000 American forces sitting there in that region, if they decide that there's an existential threat to their existence, launching nuclear weapons against Iran, against Syria or other targets, that should be of great concern to the United States. It's a good thing, though, that we've got great leadership in the White House with Kamala Harris, and I feel very good about the leadership that they're going to be able to navigate through this tinderbox right now. Final word, Colonel.
Yeah. Well, in a sane world, the president of the United States would intervene and essentially pull the plug on Kyiv completely. Say, that's it. You've had your shot. This is unacceptable. We're pulling out, which would end the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, frankly. And secondly, he would immediately turn to Netanyahu and say, you've got 48 hours to put together a negotiating strategy to end this conflict. And we'll help you, we'll assist you. But if you fail to do that, if you insist on this course where you're trying to continue the expulsion or killing of the population in Gaza, where you're going to continue harassing, brutalizing the population on the West Bank with the goal of ultimately throwing them out, if you're going to continue with this invasion in Lebanon with the goal of destroying not just Hezbollah, but bringing Lebanon as a country to heal or leave it in ruins, if you are going to continue to strike targets in Syria, Iraq, and then ultimately Iran, then we will leave you and you will be on your own. But you see, that would be a president who had a clear, unambiguous picture of our true national interests. We have no interest in a war with Russia. We have no national interest in a war with Iran, or for that matter, anybody else in the Middle East. We should be interested in the opposite. But both Zelensky and Netanyahu are interested in dragging us into their conflicts. It needs to stop.
You want more of that, and you can read the message and the mission over at
On October 1st, Iran fired over 200 ballistic and hypersonic missiles into Israel in retaliation for Israel's brazen assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah following the killing of over 2,000 Lebanese citizens and massive terror attacks using communication devices inside Lebanon, as well as the assassination of Hamas Politburo Chief Ismail Haniyeh inside Tehran following the inauguration of Iran's new president. Iran's retaliation appeared to penetrate the Iron Dome and targeted military facilities, including a key Israeli Air Force base in the Negev desert and Israel's Mossad headquarters. Israel's leadership has vowed another assault on Iran, including attacks on Iranian oil rigs and more assassinations. To better understand the situation from inside Iran, I turned to Dr. Fouad Izzadi, who is a PhD in American Studies and a professor at the University of Tehran. So, Dr. Fouad Izzadi, what are your thoughts on Iran's latest retaliation, which was conducted after the assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, as well as the assassination of several Palestinian resistance leaders and Iranian officials? And how is the public in Iran receiving this?
You know, this started in July with the assassination of Mr. Ismail Haniyeh, who was in Tehran for the inauguration of Iran's new president. He was an official guest of the Iranian government, and he was assassinated while he was in his room resting. And this was quite embarrassing for Iran, and there were a lot of calls at that time for Iran to respond. You know, we have this Article 51 under the UN Charter. If a country is attacked, then that country can respond to that attack. Iranian officials in the last few days have been saying that the reason they delayed a response to killing of Mr. Haniyeh was because American and European officials were telling Iranian leaders that a peace deal was near, that they were working on a ceasefire agreement, and they asked Iranian leaders not to do anything. It seems that request was answered positively. Iran did not do anything. And then you had the attack in Lebanon. I think we have more than 2,000 people killed in the last few days in Lebanon. 1 million people have been displaced because of Israeli attacks. Then you had the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, general secretary, and an Iranian general. and you had Israelis wanting to go and invade Lebanese territory. Adding to all these factors, you had a huge public opinion pressure on the Iranian government to do something. So last night, I think the decision was made to respond to the list I just mentioned. And, you know, I had to do a couple of interviews last night. As I was going to the TV stations, people were on the streets celebrating, waving Palestinian flags, Lebanese flags, Iranian flags, having sweets, very much celebrating. And of course, people worry about the fact that Mr. Netanyahu has proven that he's capable of overseeing a genocide, and they have nuclear weapons. So these are some of the things that people are thinking about as we speak.
So I want to unpack that, but first, when you say people are thinking about Netanyahu having nuclear weapons, Israel has vowed a very harsh response. They're talking about, of course, assassinations, attacks on Iranian infrastructure, oil rigs, and so on.
They ain't born.
Are Iranians prepared for not just the military, but are average Iranians prepared for Israel to start doing to Iranian cities what it has been doing in Beirut, for example?
The answer is no. You know, I was on a television station, a Turkish station, TRT, last night, and the anchor asked me, are people going into bunkers? I said, you know, people are out celebrating. They're not going to the bunkers. So the answer is no. Of course, you know, Iran experienced 8 years of war in the 1980s. The Saddam's government, with the help of the United States and European countries, and the money of a number of Arab states, that decided to attack Iran. So there is this culture of resistance in Iran. Of course, the younger people did not see that war, but their parents did. And I don't think you have been to Tehran. If you come here, the streets in Tehran and other cities are named after the soldiers that were killed in Iran-Iraq war. So although this is about 30 years ago, this culture of resistance against foreign power that is attacking the country is part of the Iranian psyche. And, you know, in Shia Islam, the issue of martyrdom is very much highlighted. And the majority of people in Iran are Shia Muslims. So the culture on these issues is somewhat different. The hope that I think Iranian government leaders have is that the Israelis, Netanyahu especially, realizes that Iran has a lot of ballistic missiles. The Iron Dome last night was more like a glass dome. It really didn't work. So the hope, I think, that Iranian leaders have is for Netanyahu not to do the things you just mentioned, because that would start a war. Iranian leaders have said that they're done, and they don't want to do this again tonight. And they hope that the other side realizes that continuing this war, continuing the genocide, continuing their attacks in Lebanon is not a good idea. You know, we had a UN resolution a few months ago asking Israel to have a ceasefire. Even the United States voted for that. So if Netanyahu had accepted that resolution, then we would not be talking about this issue tonight.
And what Iran has vowed that if Israel does respond, it will escalate and it will attack the oil facilities off the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and the world economy will suffer a massive blow. What does Iran's military have the capacity to do? I think many observers were surprised to see Iran's hypersonic missiles in action, and that they demonstrated the ability to penetrate the Iron Dome. But what are, to your knowledge, Iran's military capabilities, and can it actually confront Israel and all of its NATO patrons?
You know, I don't think, at least at this stage, Iran will attack Saudi Arabia or UAE. I think if Israelis attack Iran, Iran will repeat what happened last night with a larger scale. I think Iran has used about 10 or 15% of its capabilities, not the stockpile. The stockpile is quite huge, but the ability that was used was, I think, about 10 or 15%. And I think you have seen that Iranian leaders have said that if Israelis attack infrastructure in Iran, they would attack Israeli infrastructure. Last night, the targets were military bases, the Mossad headquarters. There was a concentration of tanks near Gaza, and that was attacked, the tanks that were engaging in genocide. There were some military bases in at the Lebanese border that was attacked. So Iran focused on military bases. You know, I've been doing some interviews today, and people have been asking me, you know, we haven't seen any damage in Tel Aviv. And my reply was, Iran does not consider Netanyahu to be an example. Iran was not interested in attacking women and children in Tel Aviv. That's why there are no casualties in the city. The targets were at military bases, and Israelis don't allow cameras at military bases or Mossad headquarters.
And that should shock and horrify Europe and Israel and the enemies of Iran, that they fired all the missiles and they didn't hit no innocent people. They hit what they were aiming at from damn near 2,000 miles away, man. That is magnificent military display of power, bro. That's real talk. Meaning, if they want to touch you, they're going to touch you.
Right.
But right. I think the pictures are quite telling. We see dozens of ballistic missiles landing, and these are huge missiles. They cause damage. So the hope that I think Iranian leaders had was that Israelis realize this capacity and would stop and not do anything more.
And you mentioned, Dr. Izadi, that there was a comment, actually I witnessed this comment at a meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly by Iran's recently inaugurated president, Masoud Pezeshkian, with Javad Zarif, the vice president of strategic affairs, seated beside him, that they essentially trusted the Americans after the assassination of Hamas Politburo leader Ismail Haniyeh in his hotel room in Tehran, right after Pezeshkian's inauguration, that the U.S. would find a way of finalizing a ceasefire within about a week. And that is why Iran held off on retaliating against Israel and establishing some level of deterrence back in July. In your view, was that a mistake? And how do Iranians view that? I know there were protests after Pezeshkian's comments came to light, which I think helped create pressure for this current retaliation. But in your view, was it a mistake to trust the Americans? And who's actually making the decisions here?
You know, you're right. After the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, there were a lot of people who were saying that if you had, telling the government, that if you had responded to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, then this second assassination would not have materialized. I don't know, you know, Israelis have been killing Palestinian leaders, Lebanese leaders for the last 76 years. This is nothing new. So I don't know the answer to that question. But I think Dr. Zarif, you know, Mr. Pezeshkian is a heart surgeon, so he's learning how to become a president. But Dr. Zarif has been around international issues for many decades. And I don't think he actually believed the Americans. I hope not. But, you know, Iran did not want to engage Israel militarily. Iran did not want to do what Iran did last night. And yes, one reason that the operation last night happened was because of public opinion pressure. Iran, you know, the new government in Iran, Dr. Pezeshkian's administration, wants to do other things, work on the economy. You know, he has had campaign promises he wants to fulfill. They're interested in finding someone in the White House who is interested in returning to the nuclear agreement. They're concerned about these issues. They don't want to be fighting Israelis because, you know, the people who are running Israel are genocidal. But I think the reason last night happened was that there was a consensus among Iranian leaders that if they don't do anything, the Israelis will be emboldened and they may attack Iran again at a larger scale. So this was a measure of creating deterrence. The hope that they had was to tell the Israelis that this type of attacks would not be tolerated. You know, in Iran, we have this National Security Council, 10 members, 5 come from the executive branch, including the president, the foreign minister, people who deal with these issues. We have the head of the judiciary, the head of the legislative branch, some military leaders, and this, you know, the type of decisions that was made last night is made in that National Security Council.
And Israel did not join in the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani. Some suspect because it was afraid of Iran's response. It'd be much harder for Iran to retaliate directly against the U.S. than Iran, except for, I guess, hitting the al-Assad, American al-Assad military base in Iraq. What do you think of the view that Iran did not strike back hard enough after Soleimani's killing, and that this has encouraged Israel to go on this spree of assassinations and further killings, including smuggling a machine gun into Iran to kill an Iranian military scientist. Has Iran really demonstrated deterrence at this point?
You know, you're right, because we do know this about Israeli leaders, that they don't have any ethical standards. So they engage in this type of terrorism if there is no pain, or if the pain can be tolerated. And I think you're right. They looked at Iran's response to General Soleimani's assassination, and they thought this could be tolerated, and they started repeating that style in different places. And so that's one issue that people talk about in Iran. The reason the Iranian response to General Soleimani's assassination in that manner was that Iran was not interested in a war. Iran is not interested in a war now. Iran could do a lot more damage to Ain al-Assad, that military base. But as you know, Iran notified the Iraqi government, knowing that the Iraqi government would tell the American government, the US government. And, you know, Iran has this, the missiles can hit their targets quite accurately. And Iran made sure that the sleeping areas, you know, where people are concentrated, they made sure that those buildings were not hit, because they did not want to create serious casualties. This has been the policy of Iran, because government leaders here generally don't want to have a war on their watch. And then there are some people who argue that if your response is not strong enough, that would create war, that would embolden the other side, and they would engage in activities that would lead to a major war. So I think we just have to wait and see which opinion is more accurate.
Iran notified Russia ahead of time of its retaliation against Israel. And it was around this time that the Russian Prime Minister, Mikhail Mishustin, was in Iran to meet with President Pezeshkian. Is Russia playing any role in deterring these attacks and just the overall project of regime change and destabilization in Iran? And where do the other BRICS nations fall into the equation in potentially playing a role as a buffer against all of this military pressure and economic warfare against Iran?
You know, Iran relations with Russia is good. There's this BRICS summit in Russia in the next few days. Dr. Pezeshkian is going there. They're going to sign a 20-year agreement between Iran and Russia on different topics. Iran signed a 25-year agreement with China a couple of years ago. You know, the Middle East, West Asia, has a lot of oil, a lot of gas. China gets about 55-60% of its energy from this part of the world. And I think Chinese leaders realize that having good relations with Iran is in their national interest, because the other countries, the Persian Gulf countries, the kingdoms, are more or less US client states. So they could be pressured by the United States whenever US wants to use that leverage. Iran is not a US client state. And I think Chinese leaders realize that. They have been buying oil from Iran under US sanctions. Similar thing is true with Russia. After the sanctions on Russia, Iran was a source of goods that Russians normally imported, but they could not import those goods from Europe. So Iran provided help in that area. Iran and Russia are actually neighbors. So having good relations with Russia has been a project of Iran dating back many, many years. And the relations are good. We have a lot of visits from Russian officials. The prime minister was here, as you said, a few days ago. Russia and China have been helping Iran at the UN Security Council. Just a couple of hours ago, there was a Security Council meeting on what's going on in Lebanon. And if the US could do this, they would have a UN resolution against Iran every other day. And the reason they don't have that is because they realize that Russia and China are going to veto.
Right.
So the relations are good. They're improving. It's beneficial for both sides, and we are moving towards a new world order. We're moving towards a multipolar order. BRICS is going to play an important role in the world's future. Iran became a BRICS member last year, and I think that is going to help Iran resist sanctions that are coming from the United States.
Israel suffered some serious losses today during its initial invasion of southern Lebanon, kind of confirming one of its major weaknesses. But leading up to that, there were some high-profile tactical successes for the Israeli military. There was the pager terror attack, which left thousands maimed. And I, along with many others, was sort of mystified that Hezbollah's Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah, would gather with other high-level commanders, including a leader of Iran's Quds force, in a known base or known bunker where they were then assassinated. So I think there are a lot of questions, and I wonder what your view is on this and what Iranian media has been saying. Did Hezbollah seriously miscalculate and believe that Israel would abide by the laws of war? And in the wake of the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Nasrallah clearly took on a more meaningful role as an advisor to Iran, a kind of military and strategic advisor. And did he become too conservative in deterring Israel? What are your thoughts?
One thing Israelis know how to do is terrorism, and they're very good at it. And they use tactics that are new. So, for example, the Iranian scientists that have been assassinated by the Israelis, the Israelis did not use the same tactic twice. So they come up with a new tactic to kill the new person.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Vincent Brown Scott for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is real life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
So I think Hezbollah underestimated the ability of Israelis to engage in new forms of terrorism. This is the first time in history that pages are used to kill people in that manner, or maim people. So this was a mistake. But Hezbollah was created after the 1982 Lebanon invasion. In fact, Hezbollah was created to push Israel out of Lebanese territory. They are a resistance movement. It's not an army. They don't have an air force. They don't have a navy. People in the 80s, people like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, young people that wanted to free their land from foreign occupation. So in 1982, Israelis occupied Lebanon. And in 1985, Hezbollah started a guerrilla movement against the occupation. It took them 15 years to push the occupation force out of Lebanese territory, so that until 2000. So they have had successes. They have had failures. This is an ongoing war. In wars, you always don't win. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. They lost. They have been losing in the last few days. Today, they had a success in terms of making sure that the invading forces would not come in easily. And since they have been around for about 4 decades, they are also good at some things. So their organization is capable of replacing lost leaders. And this is what they have done. Just a few days after the assassination of their Secretary General, a few days after the pager and walkie-talkie terrorism, they have managed to make sure that Israelis cannot come into Lebanon. This is, Israel is a full army. They have all the resources that they want from the United States and other Western governments. And for a militia to be able to resist not only the Israeli army, but the whole Western civilization army, it's very amazing. So at the same time that we criticize Hezbollah for not being more careful, we should remember that they have done amazing things in the last number of decades, defending their land, defending their people with very limited resources. It's easy to run an army when you have a blank check from Joe Biden. Not a difficult thing to do. But running a resistance movement with all the sanctions and all the pressures, limited resources, that's not easy. Israelis are good at getting F-35, F-15 fighter jets from the United States and bombing people that don't have air defense systems. But when they're actually on the ground, then they don't do so well.
They get their book.
So overall, I think, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah became Hezbollah's Secretary General after the previous Secretary General was assassinated by the Israelis. And he did a good job during his tenure. I think that culture of resistance that is present in Lebanon as well would lead this organization to continue functioning. More than 1 million people have been displaced in the last 2 weeks in Lebanon. And there are tens of thousands of young people, young men, that have been uprooted. Their houses have been bombed. They don't have their previous jobs. They had to leave their cities and towns. And they could be recruited by Hezbollah. They were not members of Hezbollah. So what the Israelis have done, it's a success to be able to kill Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. But they're engaging in activities that would produce people like him in a much larger scale. And that's not a good idea. So I think, given the fact that we shouldn't have an apartheid state in 21st century, sooner or later, we should be moving towards a one-state solution in Palestine. And if we manage to do that, then you're familiar with the concept. People get a vote, equal vote, the same way people in South Africa had it. And if Palestinians can vote, then you would not have Netanyahu as the prime minister. We have data showing that the majority of people who live in historic Palestine are actually Palestinians. And you may say that Israelis will not accept that, but same thing was true with South African apartheid leaders. But if there is enough internal pressure and outside external pressure, I think sooner or later that is going to be the democratic solution to the problem. And if that happens, then you're not going to have an army going over the Lebanese border trying to occupy other people's land. The question will be resolved. And I think sooner or later, we are moving towards that direction.
And we heard so much talk this week from American and Israeli officials after the perceived Israeli successes against Hezbollah of an opportunity to build a new Middle East. This was the rationale of members of the Biden administration for green lighting Israel's ground invasion of Lebanon. This language harkens back to former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice's phrase, the birth pangs of a new Middle East, used to justify U.S. support for Israel's 2006 assault on Lebanon. And I think it's become clear what she meant through the Abraham Accords pushed by President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, sort of a normalization between Israel and the wealthy Gulf Sunni monarchies. This is something obviously Palestinians oppose because it takes the Palestinian question and throws it in the historical dustbin. But what is the Iranian view on Israeli, Saudi, UAE normalization? What would it mean for Iran if this came to bear and this kind of Sunni Israeli crescent were consolidated?
The idea was to have Israeli technology with this money, petrodollars that's coming from Persian Gulf states, creating a network that would focus on Iran. The idea was to have Israel as the leader of these Arab countries, to lead them where? To lead them towards confrontation with Iran. And it's unfortunate that these client states in this part of the world, instead of using their wealth to improve the well-being of their own people or helping the Palestinian cause, they were on their way to accept that setup. This was a push by the United States under Abraham Accords. During the Biden administration, the idea was continued until October 7th happened. It's more difficult now for Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel, given the genocide of the last year. I think overall, the people of this part of the world can't tolerate a genocidal regime next to dictators leading this region towards a continuous confrontation with Iran. Palestinians are Sunnis, and the fact that Iran has been championing the Palestinian cause with a lot of pressure on Iran. Americans for decades have told Iranian leaders that if you forget about the Palestinian cause, all the sanctions would go away. Sanctions on Iran comes from U.S. Congress. U.S. Congress is fully influenced by the Israeli lobby. And if there is no problem between Iran and Israel, then Israeli lobby would not engage in this type of anti-Iran activities. So a lot of people wonder why Iran is not giving up on the Palestinian cause, given the fact that it's experiencing a lot of pressure, both economic and now, we are nearing a war in this part of the world. And the answer, I think, is that Iranians realize that you cannot live peacefully in a neighborhood with Israel because of the nature of the state, because of the terrorism that has been going on for 76 years. Because if Israelis can manage to occupy Palestinian lands, then they would want to control the whole region. And this is what Iran experienced during the Shah. Iran was controlled by the United States and Israel until the 1979 revolution. So that revolutionary spirit of Iran has not allowed the country to follow dictates from Washington and accept a setup that may be beneficial to Iran in the short term, but in the long term would turn Iran into another client state of the United States.
Hi everybody, Slaif Maroof, and I'm with Dr. Marandi. We are in the Dahiya, the southern suburb of Beirut.
Take something over there.
We
these are homes, these are apartment blocks that were struck last night.
We are on an official tour organized by Hezbollah to all international journalists to look at the destruction, the war crimes, the purposeful targeting of civilians and civilian homes. That, as you can see right here, all of these buildings, all the stores, all of this is civilian infrastructure. Dr. Marandi, we can see behind us all these international journalists that have been defaming the resistance and our martyrs. Most of them. Do you think that they will deny their own eyes and try to convince their audiences that this is Hezbollah, legitimate targets to attack Hezbollah?
Well, there are good people among them, but the problem is that the majority are people who are willing to deny reality for the sake of their job. Some are ideological, they're nasty, and then some who deny reality because of their job. Gradually, in order to be able to live with themselves, they try to convince themselves that this is the reality. So while they cannot deny that these are civilian targets, all these homes are being destroyed, they will justify it. They'll say this is a Hezbollah stronghold. Whereas if you just look around, it's like any city in this part of the world. It's ordinary people, kids, women, they live here. Men, ordinary people, shop owners, their lives are now destroyed. Many of these shops probably are rented.
So the Zionists keep on claiming this destruction of civilian infrastructure and the attacks on civilian homes and buildings and the martyrdom of civilians as huge achievements. We saw yesterday Iran deliver its retribution for the assassinations of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, Sheikh Ismail Haniya, and the many Iranian military leaders that were also assassinated over the last year. And Iran targeted only military infrastructure, hitting the Israeli airfields, the Mossad headquarters, and the gatherings of Israeli armaments, tanks, and artillery, both on the border of Lebanon and the borders of Gaza and inside Gaza. The Western media has been claiming that let's go because we need to move.
Because they're saying we have to move.
Yes,
and it's so unsafe here that they're saying we have to move because we have to stick with the journalists, otherwise they may strike. So we'd like to look around and show the buildings, but we can't because if we lag behind, then no one will take responsibility. And the Israelis obviously would like to continue their slaughter without the presence of journalists. But as you said, the Israelis target civilians, as we're seeing. The revenge that they took for last night was to bomb southern Beirut and to destroy the lives of more families and the businesses of people. All these wrecked cars, if you want to show it, it's on our right side. This is what the Israeli regime does, and the Iranians who are less civilized and who don't abide by human rights. The Iranians only target military installations, Hezbollah targeting military installations, but the civilized master race, the chosen people, they target homes. We've seen a number of these places where they've destroyed already in the last half an hour before you started filming.
Dr. Marandi, the resistance since the morning has been fighting off attempted invasions into South Lebanon. We heard already twice Hezbollah conducted ambushes of these invading forces. The last one of them is reported that at least 8 Israeli soldiers are been liquidated. We still hear threats of Israel retaliating, bombing Iran. Do you expect actually the Israelis to, number one, invade Lebanon?
Well, I think they will try something because Netanyahu has put everything on the line, hasn't he? So this is about Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu doesn't care about Israel. I don't think he cares about Zionists. He doesn't care about anything. He cares about Netanyahu. And so he has probably no option but to escalate in some way or form, whether it's in Lebanon or with Iran or with both.
There is rumors right now that the Israelis may attack Iran today or tonight. Do you think those rumors can be believed? And do we expect the Israelis to attack anyways, whether it's today or not?
I think it's quite possible. I would not rule out such a thing exactly for the reason which I just said, and that is that Netanyahu needs to continue the war. he needs to expand the war. He's trying desperately to do something before the U.S. election. He wants to get the United States involved, and that's basically because the Israelis don't care about the West. They're willing to sacrifice the West for their own selfish interests. And the West, at least the elites in the West, are because of the money that's behind the Israeli regime, the Zionist lobby, which is Christian, Jewish, and secular. They're willing to do that. They're willing to help them. So I think that this is not going to end anytime soon.
Yeah, we had to turn off the camera because there was just
hit
a
a
French
place.
strike. Yeah,
We just passed it by. They told us not to film it. Here's a gas station. Look, they struck right beside the gas station. Imagine what extra horrors that could have created.
Ya Allah, ya Allah. Ya Allah.
There's smoke all over the place right beside us. It's amazing. It's amazing how barbaric and brutal these people are.
You know, we just a few hours ago, the
revolution is a way of life.
The leader of France, Macron, issued a statement saying that France is putting all its military assets in the region in the defense of the Zionist colony. You already heard, of course, statements from the Brits and the Americans practically saying the same. In the situation that these countries, these colonialist powers, actually participate in attacks on Iran or the axis of resistance, what do you think will happen to these the presence of these powers in the region?
I don't think they'll have any impact either way. France is a weak regime that has no significance anymore, very little significance. The same is true with the UK. For some reason, they have a seat at the UN Security Council, which is a joke. The UN Security Council is a joke. The only power of significance is the United States. Israel is not a power. You know that. We all know that. Israel is a weak, pathetic regime that a colony that is fully dependent on the United States and the collective West. I mean, collectively, they do give the regime aid and support. You know, I used to walk here a lot. This is a very crowded part. You know, this is the heart of Beirut, southern Beirut. So many people always walking around. All these businesses shut down. I used to go to this a few times to this fast food place right in front of us.
Civilians that live in the Dahi out with a picture of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah.
Yeah, they're strong.
They're strong. They're proud.
No one is going to back down from these murderers.
You know, I think most Westerners don't understand, even those who support Palestine, that those rapes of prisoners and the videos being quote unquote leaked
They're
those
intentionally leaked to intimidate, not to expose.
They want to break the will of our people. They want us, especially our warrior men, that refuse humiliation and follow the path of Ali, Sayyidina Ali, that says, woe's us if we accept humiliation. Hayhata minna dhulla. And this is what they're trying to do with purposefully targeting civilians. They know that there is no military targets in these buildings. They want to purposefully humiliate our people, break our will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when I came here, it was the day, I told you before, the day after the first strikes where they targeted the south and the east and slaughtered 500 people. And so many people are upset with me, and they thought like I could bring people with me. I just came on my own. I came by myself. And so many people in Iran want to be here. These
Revolutionary salute to our brother behind the wheel for the donation to the war chest, the $100 donation to the war chest. I appreciate that love, soldier. You know, revolution is the way of life. Absolutely appreciate you, brother. Salute.
These colonialists don't understand that our people, the people of this region, are all, the resistance is enormous. It is huge. And it extends across the region. So instead of people coming to me, except for my family, which is, they want me to go back quickly, but except for my family.
Professor Morandi probably should have made this video because, it wasn't live. Israel probably going to hunt his ass, though. I'm telling y'all that right now because he one of the top Iranians who be defending them on news stations and shit. I think that showing that he riding around right now where they bombing, I think that might be a mistake.
And everyone wants to come. Even my son wants to come, but he wants me to go back.
Let's go out to see the...
So in response to the Iranian missile strikes on military installations in Israel, they took revenge on Dahia last night. And the strikes were huge. And it continued till morning. So they take revenge on ordinary people when Iran attacks them militarily. And they don't even attack military installations in Lebanon or in Iran. They may respond to Iran later, but
there's the smoke billowing from the buildings that were hit. Five buildings this morning.
Buildings.
At 4 a.m. they attacked those buildings. Ya Allah.
Amazing.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Clearly all the stuff from the restaurants.
Amazing.
This was a cafe restaurant. It's gone now. Yeah, and there's a factory that makes styrofoam boxes and so on for delivery services.
So many people traumatized.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah.
So they don't even take it out when Iran strikes them. They don't even take it out on Hezbollah. They take it out on Lebanese civilians.
There's nobody more cowardly on this planet than the Zionists and their masters in the White House that have always targeted
and all Western elites.
Yeah.
Should also not forget the joke that every kitchen contains a missile. Netanyahu said.
Yeah.
And every basement
no
has
one in the West condemns Netanyahu.
To take films for their kitchen.
Ya Allah.
They're going to have to bomb.
Ya
They're
Allah.
not going to step foot there. Hezbollah will wipe their ass off the map.
Unbelievable.
هيهات منا الذلة هيهات منا الذلة
هيهات منا الذلة
هيهات منا الذلة
لبيك
يا نصر الله لبيك يا حسين لبيك يا حسين
Your column is Robert.
So, look, it's not just these buildings, it's all the buildings around here where people were traumatized, people.
This is unbelievable. هات أعطيني إيدك أعطيني إيدك يا الله يا الله come closer. Sorry about that. Give me your hand. Sayyid. Habibi. Ya Allah, look at this. How 5 buildings?
Someone said 6, I'm not sure.
6? It's with all the civilians that were in them, all the infrastructure, all people's homes, lives, their livelihood, savings.
They don't care. They're Amalek.
We are Amalek.
We're all Amalek.
We are all Amalek. This whole planet is Amalek if we're not Jewish supremacists.
Zionist supremacists.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah. They want to turn the whole planet like this just to maintain their supremacy.
They're willing to do more than this.
They're willing
Way
to drag
more.
the whole planet to World War III. We were saying in the car that they're, looking at how the Western elite are claiming they will defend
freedom,
is the Zionists,
human rights.
Yeah, they will defend this.
They used to say something about human rights, right?
It is not in fashion
I'm
anymore.
getting old. I don't remember, but I recall once upon a time someone saying something about human rights and human dignity and civil society, and I think this is what they meant.
50 years of propaganda about human rights.
Well, this is what they've been doing all the time. It's just that in today's world, because of the internet, you can actually see it happen.
Let's go, doctor.
Slaughtering.
See, that's all they can do. That's all they can do is fire their missiles in the Lebanon.
Restaurants, people go out. The streets are usually packed.
Man to man, fight.
Kids, right now, kids are supposed to be at school. Young students are supposed to be at university studying, building a future. The shops, they're all shut down.
I'm trying to tell you, man, that's disgusting, man. But them people ain't finna give up. Let me see what about.
Died in central Beirut after Israel bombed an apartment building housing a medical center affiliated with Hezbollah. At least 14 people were wounded. The attack occurred without warning in the Bashura district of Beirut, near Lebanon's.
Attacking these hospitals and talking about, well, the Hezbollah might go in there and get some help. Well, see, Israel don't know they playing with fire. Hezbollah is going to wind up attacking their hospitals, attacking their civilians. Iran already said they're going to attack everything you attack. They say they're going to attack
Parliament and the United Nations headquarters in the city. There are reports Israel fired white phosphorus munitions during the attack. Israel also carried out numerous strikes in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Lebanese authorities say 1.2 million people have been displaced by the Israeli attacks. Meanwhile, Israel has announced 8 of its soldiers were killed in southern Lebanon, which Israel invaded earlier this week.
This comes as Israel continues to threaten to launch a major attack on Iran after Tehran fired some 180 ballistic missiles at Israeli military bases and other security sites. Israel's also killed nearly 100 people in Gaza over the past day. Meanwhile, the Emir of Qatar has accused Israel of committing a, quote, collective genocide, unquote, as he condemned Israel's ongoing attacks on Gaza and Lebanon. Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani made the comment during the
puppet clowns, the Emir of Qatar. Boy, you got the U.S. military in your country, boy. U.S. Navy. See, the gig is up. These Sunnis not doing nothing. They're watching, making strong statements. This is a humiliation. Israel has humiliated only Iran, Hezbollah, the Yemenis, Iraqi freedom fighters fighting back. These Arab kingdoms not doing shit, and they gonna be seen as the cowards that they is.
In the Asia Cooperation Dialogue Summit in Doha.
It has become clear that what is happening
is causing chaos in Africa and backing jihadists in Africa to steal from Africa. See, this punk helped set up Gaddafi. Yeah, this dude right here, they helped kill Gaddafi. You know, they want to keep divisions in Somalia, and they want to pressure Ethiopia, and they backing the terrorists that's fighting against our brothers in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. Yeah, these type of clowns causing all that chaos.
collective genocide, in addition to turning the Gaza Strip into an area unfit for human habitation in preparation for displacement. We call for serious efforts for a ceasefire and stop of the attacks carried out by the Israeli occupation on Lebanese territory. Security will not be achieved without achieving a just peace.
All this, we call for peace. Nick, this don't mean nothing. You got to put your military on the field, which they're not doing. But they attacked Libya, though. The United Arab Emirates. They attacked. They was ready to fight Libya. They was ready to fight Syria till Putin showed up. Now they just talk tough when Israel is genociding Muslim women and kids every day, and they got the nerve to talk about the Holy Mosque in Jerusalem. You ain't gonna do nothing. Israel won't let you in there unless they say so. That's what this is some cowards. You don't want to fight over the mosque. Iran got to do it. These backstabbers always was talking tough about Iran. Now Iran is standing up for the Muslim world while he making strong statements. The Sheikh of the Emir of Qatar.
And this will not be achieved in our region, except by establishing an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital on the borders of June 4th, 1967.
For more on all of this, we're joined by Nadim Houri, Lebanese researcher, international lawyer, executive director of the Arab Reform Initiative. He worked at Human Rights Watch for over a decade, where he established the group's Lebanon office and covered the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. He's joining us now from Paris. Nadim, welcome to Democracy Now! Though you are in France right now, you have close connections to people on the ground in Lebanon. Israeli airstrikes hit an apartment building in central Beirut overnight, in an area considered a safe zone given its Christian majority population. Can you talk about what you're hearing from people on the ground, what the situation is right now with what one
difference? You see, that's why I'm glad. That's why I played that video with Professor Morandi and the Lebanese dude in the streets of Beirut. Yeah, it's dangerous, but they're there telling us what's going on. Here come this dude. He wailed in Paris, but he got some contacts in Lebanon, though, man. This type of phony shit.
1.2 Lebanese displaced as well.
Sure. Thank you for having me. The offices of the research center I run is actually less than 100 meters away from where the strike happened last night, so I'm very familiar with the area. The overwhelming feeling today in Lebanon is fear, anxiety, and anger for a number of reasons. Fear because the Lebanese have seen what Israel can do to the country since 1978, repeated invasions, repeated attacks, the destruction of the 2006 war, and they've also seen recently what happened to Gaza. There's also a high level of anger because they feel this is a war that they don't understand. This is a war that many of them feel was imposed on them. They feel that there could have been a ceasefire in Gaza, which would have prevented all of this, but also anger at a totally absent Lebanese state. Many people are actually still sleeping on the streets, many of the displaced, because the Lebanese government was unable to really put together a proper evacuation plan, and people who are being hosted either through family or friends or through really a wonderful solidarity movement across the country.
So Nadim, could you explain where exactly these displaced people are going? They're sleeping in cars, as you'd said earlier, as well as in being taken in by friends or family in houses. But where in Beirut, are there places in Beirut that are still considered safe, or are they all leaving the city?
Sure. So people started moving initially from the border villages in the south a month ago, but really the movement accelerated in the last 10 days, notably on September 23rd, where Israel in one day killed more than 500 Lebanese, which was the highest death toll in Lebanon since the civil war, which ended in 1990. Since then, talked about more than 1 million people have moved. They're being hosted by friends, but also also, the Lebanese government has opened now all public schools. So all public schools are being turned into temporary shelter in Beirut, but also all across the country, in Mount Lebanon, in southern cities like Sidon and Tyre. The only problem right now is Israel is increasingly threatening villages and towns further north from its border. Some of the warnings of the last 2-3 days go way north of the Litani River, which Israel often talks about, and includes some of the major towns around Tyre, the biggest city in the south.
Nadim, you mentioned earlier that the Lebanese government has not been able to come up with a proper evacuation plan, that the state is really not functional. If you could describe what the situation was in Lebanon prior to the Israeli attacks and its invasion, both in terms of the economy, but also the government.
Sure. I mean, Lebanon has been in a state of protracted political crisis for years, some would say for decades, but it really accelerated since 2018. And in 2019, we had basically a major breakdown of the banking system. It turns out that our corrupt elites were basically running a Ponzi scheme. And since 2019, Lebanese don't have access to their savings in the bank accounts. They are allowed $200, $300 a month, depending on how much money they have in these bank accounts. We haven't had a president now for, I think, over a year and a half. So it's only a caretaker government. It's really a state that has, in a way, not only become failed, but has almost given up. They almost act as a postal box for messages between different regional and international parties. And the Lebanese really feel that. They felt it particularly. We have to remember after the Beirut port explosion on August 4th, 2020, where there again, the Lebanese woke up to see
Lebanon was colonized by France, the place he at right now. So you know who he working for.
Large parts of their capital destroyed, and learning that many of their politicians knew that ammonium nitrate was being stored in the port right by the city center, and no one did anything. I think there's a strong effort of local organizing right now. And I would add maybe perhaps to one of the challenges facing the displaced is in 2006, Hezbollah's logistics operation was a very well-oiled machine. They were very present. Since the beeper attacks that Israel had done against Hezbollah members, and many of those members, by the way, were not combatants, but were actually civilians somehow affiliated with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has not been able, through its various associations and services, to really fully support as well those displaced from the south.
Nadim, during Israel's last invasion of Lebanon in 2006, you were at Human Rights Watch in Lebanon, looked into the reasons for civilian deaths there. You tweeted earlier this week, you're, quote, very worried there are the same patterns developing now. I'm wondering if you can comment on this. And you also posted a series of comments on X Wednesday in response to what you call, quote, murmurs amongst Israelis and their supporters in the West and our region about creating a new Middle East. You write, don't do it. You've tried before, and each time it's ended in disaster. Elaborate on all of these points.
Sure, yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I spent 33 days in 2006 of the entire war documenting why Lebanese civilians were being killed. And there were really two main reasons, which we're actually finding again today in Lebanon. The first one is that Israel deliberately treats anyone and anything remotely affiliated with Hezbollah, even if they're clearly civilian, as a legitimate target, which is clearly something that international law rejects. And that's why, for example, we saw the attack last night on a medical center. There is no allegation by Israel so far that they've hit any military object other than to say, well, it was a medical center affiliated with Hezbollah. That's clearly illegal. We saw a lot of these attacks in 2006, and we're seeing many of these attacks today in 2024. That's why we actually have now more than 20 medics in Lebanon who've been killed. A number of them have been affiliated with Hezbollah. I should note there are some accounts that indicate that Hezbollah is obviously, we know it's not just an armed group. They have various civilian offices, services. It's probably the second biggest employer in Lebanon after the state. You know, probably with more than 100,000 employees. So if you consider all of them legitimate, like Israel has been tempted to do, you can just imagine the carnage and the crimes that will be committed. And the second main reason of such a high death toll is really what actually the Israeli leadership called in 2006 the Dahiya doctrine, Dahiya being the southern suburb of Beirut, where basically Israel decides to use massive and disproportionate force on civilian areas and civilian objects where Hezbollah could be supported as a way of kind of getting collective punishment and of deterring and frankly trying to push the population to say, okay, we give up. Now, we're seeing these same patterns. We're seeing these same patterns in the last 10 days with the intensification of attacks on Dahiya, and that explains why we're seeing such high civilian death tolls. Which brings me to my second point. You know, with these attacks, we started hearing, particularly after the assassination of the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, but also after Iran strikes, we saw a number of Israeli politicians, including Naftali Bennett, who's the former Israeli prime minister, saying, this is our chance to remake the Middle East. You know, but we've heard this before, for those of us who are from the region. We heard this in 1982 when Israel invaded Beirut to push out the PLO, and they tried to install a president and a regime in Lebanon that would be friendly to them. You know what? How this ended, other than the massacres and the crimes, it ended with the creation of Hezbollah. We heard that in 2006 again, when they said, you know, we're going to go in and we're going to destroy Hezbollah, and this will be the end of it. Hezbollah came out stronger than before, and in 2008, Hezbollah used that strength to actually control Lebanon even more by using some of its weapons against other Lebanese. The US made the same mistake in 2003. They invaded Iraq and they said, you know, we're going to refashion the Middle East into our own, you know, into what we would like to see, into these pro-Western governments. And that has been an utter failure, and the US is about to leave Iraq. You know, the problem is with all these strategies, all these campaigns, is we know that this overwhelming use of force cannot change people's agency. The region does not want to be a satellite of Israel or a satellite of the US. And by the way, the region does not want to be a satellite of Iran either. The problem is the region is not really being given much of a choice. And that's what's happening in Lebanon, in Palestine, and so many other places.
Well, let's go, Nadeem, to comments made by Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, who said on Wednesday that Israel should take out Iran's nuclear program. He was speaking on CNN.
Sometimes history knocks on your door and you got to seize the moment. If we don't do it now, I don't see it ever happening. And now is the moment. I also want to explain why. Because Iran's strategy, it had two arms that were sort of defending it, or they were its insurance policy against an Israeli strike, and that's Hezbollah and Hamas. But those two arms are temporarily paralyzed. So it's like a boxer out in the ring without arms for the next few minutes. Now is the time that we can attack, because Iran is fully vulnerable. The Islamic Republic of Iran, it's time to hit, destroy the nuclear program.
So that was former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett speaking to CNN. And now let's go to another former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, speaking to CNN's Christian Amanpour, who asked Barak whether he agreed with the comments Bennett had made earlier.
In order to run a full-scale attempt to change the Middle East, we need all these alliance of blessing led by the United States. Israel is very strong. Israel cannot rearrange the Middle East on its own.
So that was former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. So your response, Nadeem, to what they were saying?
Don't do it. Don't do it. You will fail. You failed in the past. I mean, we know that there is another pathway. Look, there are two central questions that, as long as they're not resolved, the Middle East is not going to know peace. The first one is the Palestine question. And the second one is a question that has been central to the region since 1979, which is, what is the legitimate place of Iran? And by trying, since the 1980s, with the Iran-Iraq war, and since so many other conflicts since then, of trying to box in Iran and trying to sort of attack it, reduce its size, the only outcome has been Iran sort of pops back out from another door and uses non-state actors to establish its influence. It's done this in Lebanon with Hezbollah. It's done this in Iraq with the Shia militias. It's helped with the Houthis in Yemen. It's done this the same now in Syria. So I think we need to, in my view, if the region is to know proper peace, we need to answer these two questions. Either the Palestinians get a full independent state, a sovereign state, a la two-state solutions, which is what the Arab countries are pushing for, or they get full citizenship in one state, Jews and Arabs treated exactly the same. And you also, that equation has to be resolved. Otherwise, and this is what October 7th reminded us, there can be no peace. There will be forms of armed resistance. Some you may like, some you may call terrorism, but there will be armed resistance as long as the Palestine question is not resolved in this region. And the second one as well, which is, and Iran has shown us that it can actually be very good at using patience. This is what it did after the US invaded Iraq in 2003. And guess what? At the time, I remember a younger Netanyahu telling the Americans in Congress, it's all going to be fine. Iran is going to lose. We're going to have democracy. Everyone is going to welcome us. Well, guess what? It didn't turn out exactly the same way. Yes, the U.S. had overwhelming power. Yes, the U.S. invaded and occupied Iraq, and the occupation was a disaster. And today, Iran is stronger than it ever was. So I'm not sure what Naftali Bennett hopes to achieve. And even Ehud Barak, which is trying to play more of a role of an elder statesman, I've seen it. We have to be more cautious. But what he's saying is we have to be more cautious, so we need to make sure that the U.S. underwrites this whole enterprise. I think that would be foolish.
So let me ask you about that just before we end, Nadeem. What are the prospects of the U.S. underwriting that plan, the potential for Israel to attack Iran?
Look, to be honest, so far, what we have seen is basically Team Biden equal Team Israel. Rhetorically, they say, oh, we've asked Israel not to do this. We've told Israel this would be bad to do. And, a few minutes later, we hear about new sales of weapons, billions of dollars being transferred, intel being provided. Right now, the U.S. is acting as a full enabler of Israel's what I would consider not only aggressive, but actually extremely dangerous policies, which actually lead to Israel acting as a spoiled child of the US and of the West, which leads it to take positions like indicating that and treating the Secretary General of the UN as persona non grata. Which, rule of law country would do that?
Democracy Now! Is funded by
A few minutes ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation made another official statement regarding the situation in the Kursk region. So, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian army has lost 400 soldiers and 20 units of heavy equipment in the Kursk region. It is reported that during the entire period of hostilities, the Ukrainian army lost 20,000 soldiers, 140 tanks, 102 armored personnel carriers, 70 infantry fighting vehicles, and 900 armored fighting vehicles in the Kursk region. Thus, Ukraine has lost an entire army corps in the Kursk region since August of this year. Representatives of the Russian military department also officially stated that the fighters of the group of troops under the designation Sever liberated the settlement of Novoselovka in the northern part of the Sudzansky district of the Kursk region. However, it is worth noting that as of October 4, 2024, the fiercest fighting is recorded in the southern part of the Sudzansky district of the Kursk region, where Russian soldiers continue to squeeze out the Ukrainian army units in the Plikovo area. According to war correspondents, Russian troops fully own initiative, continuing to dislodge enemy forces from their positions. It is reported that in the last 2 hours alone, the Ukrainian army has lost 30 soldiers, 1 unmanned aerial vehicles control point, and 5 mortar crews in the Plikovo area. War correspondents confirmed that starting on October 1st, the Ukrainian High Military Command began gradually withdrawing the remaining elite units of the armed forces of Ukraine and foreign mercenaries from the Kursk region, many of whom are active duty soldiers and officers of NATO armies. It is reported that the Ukrainian command has replaced them with ordinary combatant units of the Ukrainian army, consisting of ordinary mobilized soldiers and former inmates. War correspondents claim that the fighters of these ordinary combatant units of the Ukrainian army do not engage in shooting battles with Russian troops, and do not organize raids on roads and fields of the Kursk region. It is reported that they constantly sit in their trenches, and immediately run away as soon as Russian troops begin to storm the Ukrainian army's strongholds. At the same time, it is worth noting that the Ukrainian High Military Command continues to keep elite units and NATO soldiers in key and high-value areas of the Kursk region. For example, in such settlements as Lubimavka and Plikovo, there are still elite units of the armed forces of Ukraine, including Ukrainian Spetsnaz. Their main task is to hold these settlements at any cost, in order not to lose the logistics corridors, through which Ukrainian and NATO forces are supplied in the Kursk region. Commenting on the current situation, an authoritative military journalist and expert Yuri Podolyaka said that everything that is happening right now in the Kursk region indicates that the Ukrainian army units will soon be finally defeated in Lubimavka and Plikovo. According to him, the liberation of these settlements by Russian troops would be an important milestone in the destruction of the Ukrainian army units and NATO forces in the Kursk region. In the Toretsk direction of the front, the situation of the Ukrainian army also continues to deteriorate rapidly. So, on October 3rd, at 8 a.m. Moscow time, war correspondents confirmed that Russian fighters of the group of troops under the designation center entered the strategically important settlement of Leonidovka and took 90% of the territory of this village under their control. According to war correspondents, as of October 4, 2024, the Ukrainian army units continue to maintain fierce resistance near the Obzornaya railway station, in the northeastern part of Leonidovka. Thus, Russian troops also began to approach the city of Toretsk from a southwesterly direction. At the same time, it is worth noting that Russian offensive units are already in the city center, gradually moving forward deep into enemy territory. Observing the actions of Russian troops in this direction of the front, it becomes clear that the Russian High Military Command is using the same tactics in the battles for Toretsk, as in Volodar. Russian troops are gradually covering the Toretsk from the flanks, surrounding the city from the west and east. As a result, this will force the Ukrainian army units to leave Toretsk in a northerly direction. Meanwhile, the representative of the Ukrainian General Staff Vadim Misnik commented on the statements of Western experts and Ukrainian telegram channels that Russian troops had used the world's most powerful non-nuclear bomb ODAB 9000 in the Kharkiv direction of the front. Trying to calm down the Ukrainian soldiers, Vadim Misnik started saying a bunch of nonsense. In particular, he said that this aerial bomb is not so terrible and deadly. He made this statement against the background of a video that appeared on the network, which shows a massive explosion that destroyed the positions of the Ukrainian soldiers in the city of Volchansk. Analyzing this video, many Western experts concluded that Russia for the first time used the world's most powerful non-nuclear bomb ODAB 9000. Moreover, the authoritative Russian telegram channel Condottiero also stated that the Russian military used an aerial bomb ODAB 9000, with an explosive mass of more than 7 tons. By the way, war correspondent Andrei Rudenko was one of the first to report that the Russians used the aerial bomb ODAB 9000 in Volchansk. However, it is worth noting that there are also military experts who doubted that this aerial bomb was ODAB 9000. According to them, Russian engineers have not yet managed to create an effective universal planning and correction module for this aerial bomb, and therefore its application in the special military operation zone is not possible. For example, experts from the Network Edition Life said that the positions of Ukrainian soldiers in Volchansk were destroyed not by ODAB 9000, but by the aerial bomb ODAB 1500. According to them, such a powerful explosion is explained by the fact that ODAB 1500 hit a warehouse, where missiles and shells of the Ukrainian army units were stored. My friends, whatever it may be, it is necessary to admit that Russian engineers are still developing and improving universal planning and correction modules for heavy-duty aerial bombs of the FAB and ODAB families. By the way, a year ago, many experts also did not believe that Russian engineers could create a universal planning and correction module for the aerial bomb FAB 3000. However, as time has shown, Russian engineers still managed to create an effective planning and correction module for this aerial bomb, as a result of which dozens of powerful strongholds and command posts of the armed forces of Ukraine have already been destroyed. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation soon officially confirms that Russian engineers have managed to create a universal planning and correction module for the world's most powerful non-nuclear bomb ODAB 9000.
It's been another shocking and tumultuous week across the region. Israel has been waging its genocide in Gaza for almost a year as it intensifies its attacks on Lebanon. On Friday, Israel carried out an apocalyptic bombing attack on Beirut's southern suburb, killing Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of the Lebanese resistance group Hezbollah. Many civilians were killed in the massive bombing that destroyed multiple residential buildings in the densely populated neighborhood. We'll be talking more about Nasrallah and events in Lebanon with journalist Rokhaya Shamsuddin in Beirut later on in the program. But first, we're going to talk about last night's Iranian missile attack on Israel. Iran's Islamic Republican Guard Corps says that on Tuesday night, it fired dozens of ballistic missiles at vital military and security targets in Israel. The IRGC said that the targets included, quote, the centers of conspiracy and planning of assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah Secretary General Syed Hassan Nasrallah, as well as of the military commanders from Hezbollah and Iran's own Revolutionary Guards. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Wednesday that in carrying out the attack, quote, Iran exercised its right to self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris condemned the attack as a, quote, reckless and brazen attack, while British Prime Minister Keir Starmer claimed falsely that, quote, the Iranian regime has launched over 200 ballistic missiles at civilian targets in Israel, and asserted that it was, quote, an attempt to harm innocent Israelis. Both U.S. and British military forces were involved in attempts to repel the attack. Ali, you're currently in Amman, Jordan, and you actually witnessed last night's Iranian missile attack on Israel. What happened and what did you see?
Yes, Nora. Well, yesterday afternoon, the United States issued a warning that it had detected that Iran was preparing to launch missiles towards Israel I heard that news at around 5 in the afternoon. And around 7:30 in the evening, I heard on Al Jazeera that Iran's Fars news agency was reporting that Iran had just launched its missiles. And I immediately went outside, not knowing what to expect. The sky was clear and it looked like nothing was happened. But then at 7:38 p.m., I started to see one or two strange flashes in the sky, as well as aircraft that did not appear on the flight radar app, which you can use to track air traffic. And that indicates that they were almost certainly military aircraft patrolling the sky. But then very quickly, the sky was absolutely filled with dozens of bright spots streaking across the sky very fast. And this is a video of that I filmed myself. And you'll see now, it was sort of already dark. And there you go. It was just this incredible stream of missiles coming across the sky, like a river flowing through the sky directly from east to west. So really from the direction of Iran towards Israel or occupied Palestine. But also there seemed to be missiles coming in smaller clusters as well. So it wasn't just this one stream, and they would head out west over towards Israel and then drop straight down. At first, it all happened in complete silence. And then it seems like at least a minute or more later, there was just this rumble like thunder, which was the sonic boom. And then it seemed to suddenly stop. And we went inside thinking it was over. But then about 5 minutes later, it started all over again. And there was another big river of missiles. We went up on the roof to watch, and everyone was outside on their roofs and balconies cheering. And there's lots of social media showing that people were celebrating all over Jordan, just as they were in Palestine, as Abu Bakr told us. And it struck me that if this had been during the daytime, we probably would not have seen very much because the sky would have been too bright. And I don't know if there were specific tactical or technical reasons why Iran carried out the attack after dark. But one clear result of that is that millions of people across the region witnessed it with their own eyes. And if that was Iran's intention to make it visible in such a spectacular way, then it was a really brilliant move from a public relations standpoint. I mean, I just can't describe how awesome it was in the true sense of the word.
And did you see any missiles being intercepted by, the Iron Dome, for example?
Well, I did see there were clearly attempts at interceptions, or what looked like there could be interceptions, with missiles coming up from the opposite direction, from the west towards the east. And I think you can even see one in the video we just showed. It's hard to tell how successful those were since everything was happening at high altitude. But it was very clear that the number of interceptors was tiny compared with the number of incoming missiles. So even if there were some successful interceptions, just the sheer number of incoming missiles looks like it would have saturated any air defense system. And I'm not sure it would have been the Iron Dome, since, as we discussed last week, that is more of a short-range system. But as we also discussed, Israel and the United States have longer-range missile defense systems, but there's no way they could have kept up with this.
Yeah. And right after the Iranian action, U.S. President Biden came out and made some comments. Let's look at what he said.
Words about Iran's missile attack on Israel today. At my direction, the United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military. It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is...
All right, so that's enough of that. Biden called this a brazen attack, and he claimed it was defeated and ineffective. How credible is that statement?
It's not credible at all, because there's plenty of video evidence that a very large number of missiles hit their targets on the ground in Israel. And we'll get to the videos in a minute. But first, a statement released by the Pentagon, the U.S. Defense Department, says, quote, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Cole and USS Bulkeley, both deployed in the Eastern Mediterranean, fired a dozen interceptors at incoming Iranian ballistic missiles as part of defending Israel, end quote. The statement adds, quote, at this time, it is unknown if those interceptors took down any of the missiles, end quote. Now, that's the only specific reference I could find so far to US involvement in the attempted interceptions. And that was also stated by Pentagon Press Secretary General Pat Ryder at a press conference on Tuesday. Ryder said, quote, during the attack, the US military closely coordinated with the Israeli Defense Forces to help defend Israel. US Navy destroyers deployed in the Middle East region supported the defense of Israel by firing approximately a dozen interceptors against the incoming Iranian missiles. And again, he did not refer to any specific other specific US assets firing missiles. So there really appears to have been a rather minimal American effort. Ryder also claimed, quote, initial reports indicate that Israel was able to intercept the majority of incoming missiles, but videos demonstrate that this is absolutely false. I also want to say, before we get to the videos, that it is possible that other US assets were used that were based, for example, in Jordan or other Arab countries. There are large US bases here in Jordan, and that they're just not saying that because of the political unpopularity. Everyone in Jordan was celebrating this, so it just goes against what everyone wants.
Right. All right, well, let's look at some of those videos.
Yeah, so all the videos I'm going to show you are verified, according to Evan Hill, a journalist with the Washington Post's open source investigation unit. And let's start with this one posted by CNN's Jim Sciutto of missile impacts in Tel Aviv.
Oh, God. Okay, guys, we got to get off the roof. These are coming down right next to us here. They're coming down. One just about, we got to go inside.
Yeah, well, let's run that one more time.
Oh, God. Okay, guys, we got to get off the roof. These are coming down right next to us here. They're coming down. One just about, we got to go inside.
Yeah. And let's look at the next video, which shows a missile hitting the headquarters of Israel's Mossad spying and assassination agency in Glilot. And this is just north of Tel Aviv. And you'll recall that Glilot is a site that Hezbollah itself had struck a couple of weeks ago. I think that was in retaliation for the assassination of its military leader, Fuad Shukr. I'm not sure if we're having a technical issue, but we will. Oh, here it goes. Yeah, it goes. Let's show that one more time. And this is obviously an Israeli filming it, and he's saying in Hebrew, "Lo me'amin," which means I can't believe it. You know, it's just something people say when they're shocked at the sight they're seeing. So there we go. That was Glilot. And then the next one shows probably what was the largest single target. And this is Israel's Nevatim Air Base in the Naqab region in the south of the country. And that's just really, we could even keep that running. I don't know if we can keep it running with this without the sound, but I just want to note that Nevatim is one of Israel's most important air bases. It is where Israel's state-of-the-art US-supplied F-35 warplanes are based, the same warplanes that were reportedly used in the attack which killed Hassan Nasrallah. It is also where the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris administration has been airlifting huge quantities of bombs and other weapons to Israel over the last year. So Nevatim has played a major part in Israel's genocide in Gaza and its attacks on Lebanon and other countries, including Syria and Yemen. Nevatim is also where Wings of Zion is based. That's Israel's version of Air Force One, which Netanyahu used on his recent trip to the UN in New York. And of course, many people will have seen that photo of Netanyahu ordering the hit on Hassan Nasrallah from the UN headquarters. And we have another video here of the missiles striking Nevatim. And you can just see how many there are coming down. And the Israelis who are watching are just like shocked by that. And in that one, I think you can actually see one missile being intercepted fairly close to the ground, while all the others appear to get through. And that interception is a clue that these missiles were likely on target, because Israel is not going to waste limited air defense resources on low-value assets. And in another video of the strike on Nevatim that I'm not going to show, but that I did see and that has been circulated, I counted 24 missiles hitting the ground in the space of 30 seconds. So that gives you a sense of the extraordinary intensity of this attack. There is one more video I want to show of the attack on Nevatim. And it also shows that intensity. But again, you can hear the absolute shock and amazement in the voice of the Israeli witness who is filming. And I think that's significant because, remember, Israelis have lived through, missile barrages from Hamas for many years, and they have never seen anything like this.
נפילות, אחי, נפילות של החיים בנבטים. נפילות בנבטים, אחי. נפילות קשות בנבטים, שומע? וואו, 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 וואו. וואו! הכל נופל לנבטים, אני אומר לך, מתקפה אחת החזקות. אימא'לה, 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 זהו, למקלט.
Yeah, so so in every video filmed by Israelis, they're just they've never seen anything like it. And again, so I think that spectacular aspect of doing this at night played a very important psychological role in the attack. And finally, I want to show a video of massive impacts near the Ort Tel Nof air base. This is about 36 kilometers south of Tel Aviv. And pay attention in this video how fast these missiles come down. And there don't appear to be any interceptions. And I'm certainly no military expert, but these may well be hypersonic missiles that travel at many, many times the speed of sound. They certainly look different to the ones that hit Nevatim and other sites. So let's take a look at this video.
ראית את זה? כן. אוי אוי. אימא'לה.
Yeah, so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so it's clear that Biden's claim that the attack was, quote, defeated is completely belied by visual evidence. But how do we know how much damage these strikes did to Israel's infrastructure of genocide?
Well, Israel is, of course, trying to play down the effectiveness of the Iranian attack. For example, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz makes the following claim, and I quote, "The initial assessment is that Iran launched about 180 ballistic missiles at Israel, most of which were intercepted or landed in open areas, end quote. And clearly from the videos we've just seen, and I only showed a few of the ones that are available, that's just a lie. There are videos of dozens of missiles hitting the ground. But Israel is also under very strict military censorship, and so they're not going to tell us how bad the damage is. They also will not want Iran to know how effective its strike was or to reveal how vulnerable they are. Also, I think it's significant that Israel did have a few hours of warning given by the United States, which would have given them some time to evacuate bases or to try to move valuable assets to the extent that was possible. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps says 90% of its missiles hit their targets. I can't tell you how precise that number is, but from the evidence we've seen, it's a lot closer to the truth than what the American and Israeli claims are.
Yeah. Well, since the attack last night, Israelis have been gloating that 0 Israelis were killed and that the only person who was killed was a Palestinian. He was Sameh al-Asali, and he was hit by a large missile fragment in Jericho in the Jordan Valley region of the occupied West Bank. Ali, what does this tell us about the success or failure of the attack?
Yeah, I think it reinforces how successful it was from a number of aspects. Of course, it's absolutely horrible that Sameh al-Asali was killed, and I'm not going to show the video of that, but there is a video from a security camera, and just like the chances of him being in that place at that time must have been tiny. And it's very likely that the fragment that hit him was due to an interception. And if that interception hadn't happened and the missile would have been allowed to proceed and hit a military target, then he wouldn't have been killed. The other thing to say is that these were targeted at the Mossad headquarters and at Israeli military bases. And Israel is not going to tell us if people were killed or injured there. They're just not going to say. But I did notice as well how many pro-Israeli accounts on social media seem to be gloating that no Israelis were killed, at least according to the official story. And that's very telling because it reveals that many Israelis measure military success not by whether or not military objectives have been achieved, but by how many people they kill.
Yeah.
It's clear that Iran's goal was not to kill people, but to show its capabilities on a scale we have never seen before. It wanted to demonstrate that Israel is effectively defenseless against a large-scale missile attack and to restore some measure of deterrence and, of course, to damage Israel's military infrastructure. If Iran had wanted to kill a lot of people, it could have done what Israel does, which is to indiscriminately bomb cities and neighborhoods, but it didn't do that. It fired these missiles at military targets.
Right. So you talked about the decision to carry out the attack at night, but why was it last night that Iran chose to carry out the missile strikes?
I think Iran must have felt it had no choice and that its policy of restraint was only fueling Israeli genocide and aggression. Let's recall that on April the 1st, Israel carried out its brazen bombing of Iran's consulate in Damascus. 2 weeks later, Iran launched an unprecedented drone and missile attack in retaliation, which the United States and Israel claimed to have thwarted, although there are reliable reports that the ballistic missile part of that attack, which was much smaller than last night's attack, that those missiles did get through. Nonetheless, the attack was fairly restrained because Iran wanted to send a signal that it is willing and able to hit Israel directly, but not to escalate things too far. But it seems to have achieved the opposite by signaling that any Iranian response to Israeli aggression would be contained. Then, at the end of July, Israel assassinated Fuad Shukr, a senior commander of Hezbollah in Beirut. And then hours later, it murdered Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, while he was in Tehran for the inauguration of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. As you'll recall, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, ordered retaliation. This was considered a serious attack in the heart of Iran's capital against a visiting foreign leader during Iran's presidential inauguration. And so he said there has to be a major retaliation, but that did not come, perhaps reinforcing the sense of confidence in Washington and Tel Aviv that Iran was not willing to confront them directly. And then, of course, in September, Israel began its assault on Lebanon with the pager and walkie-talkie attacks, followed by a series of assassinations of senior Hezbollah leaders. And then, of course, on Friday, it carried out the attack that killed Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. Israel has also been waging an ongoing bombing campaign against Lebanon, in Syria, murdering hundreds of people in Lebanon with the type of indiscriminate attacks we've seen in Gaza for a whole year. And Israel appeared to be moving towards a ground invasion of Lebanon with the tacit blessing and support of the Biden administration. Netanyahu, you'll remember, called the assassination of Nasrallah Operation New Order. And that's really an expression of the hubris and triumphalism that overtook both the Israeli and Biden administrations, who thought that the tide had turned, that Hezbollah had been destroyed, and that soon Washington and Tel Aviv's hegemony would be restored. So in this context, Iran could simply not sit back anymore and clearly felt that it needed to send a strong, retaliatory, and deterrent message. And the triumphalism has already been tamped down, as Hezbollah has demonstrated that despite the loss of Nasrallah, it is willing and able to fight, and that Israel will not be able to roll over Lebanon as it had, back in 1982 before Hezbollah was founded. And now this attack from Iran will further concentrate minds in Washington and Tel Aviv.
Mm. Well, after the Iranian missile attack last night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, "This evening, Iran made a big mistake and it will pay for it. The regime in Tehran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and to examine."
Talk about. Let's talk. Important, if you want to follow Scott's good works, that you go to scottritter.com. That's scottritter.com, as it's spelled, as it sounds. You can follow everything that's going on with Scott there. Also follow Scott on Telegram. And when you go to scottritter.com, there are means there to donate. And as you can hear, hungry mouths barking in the background. As you know, you see people online, you see us talking and doing all kinds of stuff, but everybody's got to survive also. So it would be great when you get there if you can both share Scott's website, scotritterextra.com, and donate in any way and means that you are able. Thank you very much. For those who can donate, even if you can't donate, share it on all your social media platforms. And also, as I always say, make sure you put a little note to people asking them to donate, and they appreciate Scott's work, help keep it going. All right, Scott, let's get going. I guess we start with the big story. So everybody's heard about or everything that we can possibly hear about the Iran missile attack on Israel. Have you gotten any new information, anything that you think that people may have not heard, that people may not know, that you find, or a particular perspective on it that you think people may find interesting?
Well, I think the first thing that people need to know is that this missile attack was not designed to be punitive in nature. This missile attack was designed to send a message, and every aspect of this missile attack, from the launch to it hit, the kind of missiles used, everything, the targets, was designed to send a message. Whether or not the politicians are willing to accept the message being sent is a different question. But I think people need to understand that Iran, the message Iran sent is as follows: we can hit any place we want in Israel, anytime we want, with as much firepower as we want, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And they demonstrated that by applying techniques that stripped bare the notion that there is a effective missile defense shield over Israel. I'm reading into this. I can't say that I received this information from the Iranians.
Right.
They would be loath to tell me to begin with. But having studied missiles for a number of years, I took a look at the mix of missiles being fired, and the associated them with the firing units, etc., and have come away with the conclusion that Iran has found the perfect mix of missiles designed to confuse and disrupt the missile defense shield to the extent that basically the missiles that were intercepted were designed to be intercepted. And the missiles that hit the target were designed to hit the target. And what Iran showed is that we have your number. And they proved it. The Israelis are very good at reverse engineering problems. I worked with them for many years and worked with them to reverse engineer the Iraqi Scud missile problem, every aspect of it, operationally, from a procurement standpoint, manufacturing standpoint, technical standpoint. So I'm confident that they have applied that skill set to what occurred on Monday. And they know exactly what I'm saying because I just know these people. And I know that they've prepared briefs that have gone up to their chain of command saying there's literally nothing we can do. We've spent almost $1 trillion building a missile defense shield that cannot defend us. There's no tweak that can be done. There's no adjustment can be done. The Iranians have our numbers. And if we do anything against Iran, understand that if they choose to hit any target in Israel, it's gone. They made that very clear. Iran wasn't looking to have a mass casualty event. They weren't looking to kill anybody. In fact, the only reason why people died is freak accidents. One of the missiles shot down by Jordanian air defense fell on Jericho and crushed a man. I think another person died from a missile fragment, again, from a missile that had been shot. Iranian missiles that landed where Iran intended them to land killed nobody, and that was the Iranian intent. And then, and I need to throw this in too. For those people out there who call the Iranians and Hezbollah bloodthirsty, this, that, and the other thing, I would just ask you to take pause for a second and think about what is the moral foundation of Hezbollah and Iran. And it's principled adherence to the Shia faith. It's a branch of Islam. But if you go and study what the Ayatollahs study in the Shia faith, one of the things that comes off straight up is the absolute principled stance the Shia take regarding killing innocents. They just don't do it. They don't, sometimes it happens inadvertently, things of that nature, but the idea that the Shia would deliberately target civilians to commit mass murder is absurd. But again, we don't take the time to do that. The Iranians sent so many signals here about who they are, what their goals and objectives are. I even believe they sent a signal to Israel, and I could get in trouble for this because people will disagree, and I know Iranians may disagree because they don't want to admit it, but they sent a signal to Israel about what targets they may accept Israel to strike in retaliation to bring this into an end. And I'll let the Israelis figure that one out, but let me just say, if it deals with ballistic missile production of a certain kind of missile, not the Fatah, you might be right. This is a very dangerous game that's being played, though. Iran did not want to undertake this. This was only done after very serious debate where the hardliners had to be shouted down by the realists, and that the military had to ensure that its actions conformed with the totality of what Iran, the Islamic Republic, is. Not just a purely military act of retaliation designed to achieve X, Y, and Z, but there was a huge political element attached to this. And if you've taken a look, Israel hasn't struck. Now they say they'll strike after Rosh Hashanah. I'm sure I butchered that. The Jewish New Year. But where are they going to strike? And here's the other thing that's factored in here: the United States. I mean, Israel right now has crossed every red line when it comes to America. I think Israel needs to understand that the Biden administration is facing the perfect storm of everything that's going to destroy the Kamala Harris candidacy. The hurricane response it's humiliating for the Harris. It's despicable. Handing out $750 to people at a time when you're handing out $10,000 to $13,000 prepaid Visa cards to illegal immigrants or sending $7.9 billion to Ukraine, $8 billion to Israel to fight wars we don't need to be fighting, is indefensible, and they can't defend this one. The longshoreman strike is going to, unless it gets finished soon, is going to gut the American economy in the lead up to a holiday season. Again, I reflect on James Carville's famous words that he posted on the door of the war room of the Clinton campaign in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. Americans will vote their pocketbooks above all else. And the longshoreman strike is going to destroy the American economy. And now, if Israel, in defiance of the instructions given to it by the United States, attacks Iran in a manner which impacts its nuclear infrastructure or its oil production infrastructure, Iran will shut down Middle East oil production. That's 10% of the world's oil production, but it has everything to do with energy security. And given the speculative nature of the oil market, prices will literally go through the roof overnight. Now, again, we're coming into a holiday season. This is the period of time where people use their hard-earned money to do things that make them happy with their families. Every religion is involved, and you're now going to make gasoline $12 a gallon.
The winter, when people need heating oil,
when they need heating oil and they can't afford it. When all the money they were saving for these family times is gone, evaporates, and now there's nothing, and now they're destitute. How many Americans are one missed paycheck away from losing everything? You could literally put this country into a Great Depression redux if this gets out of control. That will again be the end of the Harris campaign. So now, what is Israel going to do? And America needs to come face to face to the reality that we have subordinated ourselves to the policy priorities of a government that has been declared to be apartheid and genocidal by the International Court of Justice, a government that shows zero regard for human life, a government that, in order to kill one man, Hassan Nasrallah, who, by the way, apparently had just agreed to a ceasefire, a man who had embraced peace and said, this is the direction we want to go, no war, peace. And they killed him. But in the process of killing him, killed 700 to 1,000 innocent Lebanese civilians. Total disregard for international law, the rules of anything. And we've subordinated ourselves to this murderous regime. It's time for America to reevaluate its relationship with Israel. And I mean to have a sit down, come to Jesus moment with yourselves. Is this really the nation we want to ally ourselves with? Are they our friends? And the answer is no across the board. No. And we'll see what Israel does. But remember, this is about Benjamin Netanyahu's political survival. It's not about the survival of Israel. Israel is actually committing suicide as we speak. Anybody who thinks, listen to Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, and these other Israeli the Zionist murderous thugs out there saying now's the time to take down Iran. Hezbollah has been mortally wounded. Hamas is gone. Really? Go ask the soldiers fighting in Gaza right now how crippled Hamas is. Go ask the Israeli soldiers getting butchered in southern Lebanon how crippled Hamas is. Please don't confuse restraint with weakness. Ask Israel how weak Iran is when those missiles impacted down. I know they've spun it. Nothing happened, this, that, and the other thing. Everybody around the world saw the flight of the bumblebees over Israeli airspace and watched as they impacted on the targets they were intended to hit. Everybody knows what happened, and no amount of spin can change that. It's Israel that's weak. They've done, look, sports analogy. Do you win championships with trick plays? The answer is no. You can win one game with a trick play properly done at one point in time, but if your entire play sheet is trick plays, you're going to get crushed. Israel has executed a series of trick plays. The pagers blowing up, the targeted assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, trick plays. Hassan Nasrallah has been preparing for his death for decades. Israel tried to kill him in 2006. They've been trying to kill him every year since then. Hassan Nasrallah has made peace with that reality. He has said, I am a living martyr. My death is already preordained. I will be martyred. And Hezbollah has prepared for this. It's not as though his death, which is tragic and a huge blow to the people of Lebanon, to Hezbollah, to anybody who wants a peaceful resolution to this. Remember, Hassan Nasrallah is the guy that said yes to a ceasefire. Just want to remind you that. That's his last act, was to say yes to a ceasefire. And all the guarantees that come with it that were given by America when Israel assassinated him. But to think that his death somehow crippled Hezbollah, a resistance organization that has been preparing since 2006 for this very moment. They've thought through every contingency. There's nothing that they haven't considered. The redundancy has been built into their system. Hezbollah is not weak. Hezbollah is stronger than ever because they've absorbed the blows of the Israelis and they are still there. And Israel's finding out as they try to launch incursions into southern Lebanon. So, the takeaway here is that anybody who thinks that Israel has the upper hand is going to be sadly disappointed. And Americans need to understand that what Israel is doing has a detrimental impact on us as a people. It's going to destroy our economy. It's already destroyed our reputation around the world. There's a reason why the global South has gravitated to BRICS, Russia, China, India, and gravitated away from the United States. It's because what we stand for is war. What we stand for is death. What we stand for is destruction. We don't stand for peace. We don't stand for stability. We don't stand for good relations among men. We're the opposite. We are the evil that walks the world. And one of the reasons why we can be classified as evil is because of our continuing embrace of the most evil entity on the planet today, which is the state of Israel.
You know what's interesting, and that is the claims by our leaders that we are standing with Ukraine, that we are standing with Israel, that we are supporting Ukraine, that we are supporting Israel. And I've said this, one of the things that you judge a relationship by is the outcome, right? And I've told the story. I have a cousin who, and he laughs about it. At his younger years, he was drinking, he was partying, he was cavorting, he was running, he was doing everything he had no business doing. And he wasn't a happy guy. We all were like, this guy's gonna, he's going a freight train to hell. You can see he was out of control, right? And I've said this story. And he met this woman and she calmed him down. Now, I'm not a religious guy myself, but she took him to church and she calmed him. She turned down the volume. She got him back in college. She got him, you know what I mean? She got this guy calmed down. And he got, you know what I mean? And kind of straightened and calmed down. There's old Frank, my cousin Frank. And we're like, geez, we never thought anything could calm this guy down and get him. He's a new guy, new man, right? Walks around with a tie and jacket and things like that, right? Never thought I'd see it. Here's my point on that. I can look at his relationship with her and say the outcome. Man, she sure was good for him. He probably wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for this woman, right? His life would be hell if he was. So you judge the relationship and the value of the relationship, the outcome. How's things looking? Okay, here's my point. If Ukraine or Israel are our girlfriend, we ain't been a good, you know what I mean, influence on their lives. Judge the outcome. We're here to support. We've got a new girlfriend, like whatever, and it's Ukraine, or the other way around. They got a new girlfriend and it's the US. How do things look in Israel and Ukraine since the US girlfriend has come into their lives? Their generations of people are being wiped out. Both of their economies annihilated. Both the world, the global South is looking at both of them saying, what the hell is that? What a disaster. You know what I mean? So the idea that the US says, I'm standing with Israel or standing with Ukraine, you have created the destruction of both countries. The worst thing that could possibly happen to Ukraine and Israel is their relationship with the United States. Scott.
No, I mean you're 100% correct. I don't, we can blame, and I do. I blame the Ukrainian government. I blame the Israeli government. But we have to be honest. Both are creations of the United States. Both would not exist without the United States. There's something inherently wrong with us collectively as a people that allows us to always pick the worst in society and promote them as being the best. And let's look at Ukraine. Ukraine is a direct result of a program run by the CIA since 1948 that breathed life into Ukrainian nationalism. The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, Stepan Bandera, and others. Why? Because we wanted something that undermined the Soviet Union, Soviet authority. But look at what I just said. We wanted something that undermined. Now we'll use these. These are academic terms, to undermine, to subvert. But what tools did the nationalists use? Murder, rape. That's it. That's all they know how to do. They murder and they rape. I mean, some of the stories, I'll just give you an example of one that I want everybody to reflect upon when next time you talk about, the noble Ukrainian people. There's a village, I think it was Adamy, Adamy, populated by Poles, that Bandera's thugs decided they were going to go and depopulate. As they went from house to house, and what they did to the people in there is graphically portrayed. Literally ripping living babies apart in front of their mother, ripping a living baby apart in front of their mother, disemboweling the mother in front of the father, and then slowly cutting the father into small pieces, preserving his life as long as possible to preserve the horror and the pain. But you didn't want to scare the other people in the village, so they brought in a female choir. Think about this next time you see one of those Ukrainian female choirs up there singing Stepan Bandera is my father, who would sing to drown out the sounds of the screaming, dying people in this. And then they'd move from building to building, repeating this over and over again. This is the government of Ukraine today. Same people, same ideology. Yats, you remember Yats, our man Yats, Victoria Nuland in her infamous phone call? Yats is on record talking about the fact that the Donbass has too many people. There's too many people in the Donbass, and they've become superfluous. They need to be eliminated, exterminated was the word he used. He's talking about the Russian speakers. They're a problem. You see, there's too many of them. We don't need so many of them. They become inconvenient to our cause. We need to exterminate them because that's the only thing these people know. They only know how to kill. They only know how to rape. They only know how to murder. That's it. That is the Ukrainian solution. Now, we can dress it up all we want. We can put pig on that lipstick, lipstick on that pig, but it's still a pig. The Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian nation is a poisonous, murderous entity that's incompatible with civilized human existence. This is the reality of it. And the Ukrainian people, having sold out or been bought out or turned a blind eye for so long can't escape the fact that they themselves have been poisoned. So we created this Ukraine. We created it. We can sit there and condemn it, and I do, but it is a creation of the United States. We made it what it is. It could have been a completely different place had we done things differently, picked different people. But we can't, you see, because in order to take on the Russians or the Soviets back then, we don't know how to have a discussion, to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about the world today and how we're going to live, and let's bring an audience in and see who wins the debate. Because we're a little bit concerned about the outcome. Because you create what you are. And if you want to get down to it, all the United States knows how to do is kill, murder, and rape. That's how we interface with the world. If we do anything benevolent, it's not done, out of the goodness of our hearts. It's done because we're trying to control you, to win you over, to suck you in, to make you subordinated to us by creating this guilt complex where you have to align yourself with us because we saved you. That's our relationship with Europe. We're not there because we like the Europeans. They're waking up to that. Emmanuel Macron finally is realizing it. America's not here. They don't care about us. We never have. We have never cared about Europe. We only use Europe for our goals, for our end. Remember Donald Rumsfeld? We wanted to turn Europe into what he called lily pads so that we could hop American forces across around the world to conquer the world. That's it. We don't care. When old Europe started to go, well, we're not too thrilled with this. He said, that's okay. We got new Europe. we got all these idiots in the East. Now they're going to buy into the fake concept of American democracy and freedom and liberty. It's garbage. We don't even do it here at home. I mean, that's the thing. We have this theory that I love. I love the theory of America. I'd like to breathe life into the theory of America. But the reality is so harsh, so bad. We created Ukraine. We created Israel. We made Israel what it is today. We did. We could have changed it. We could have put pressure on it. We didn't have to allow them, for instance, to have nuclear weapons. We should have told them not just no, but hell no. And all along, we could have strangled that pathetic little country economically. But instead, we used them as part of our Cold War strategy to contain and confront the Soviets, this ideological conflict. And in doing so, we created a beast, this monster. And now what we allowed is that monster, just like with the Ukrainians, when you work with them, they come back to you. They insinuate themselves back into you. There's a reason why there's in Ellenville, New York, there's a hill with 4 statues on it, the Hill of Heroes. Those statues of our Banderas, Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich are right there side by side. These are guys who literally carried out the crimes I just told you. They're here in America, worshipped as heroes by Americans. Ukrainian Americans send their children to this camp every year to be indoctrinated into this ideology of hate. And then they get out, and because the United States allows it, they infiltrate into academia, into government. This is where you get your Victoria Nulands. The same thing with Israel. We send them off. Why do we let Americans fight in the IDF? Why? Because then they come back and they get into Congress. They come back and they serve in government. When you have an American official say, I am a Zionist, that is immediately disqualified. Because the only statement an American official is allowed to make, or should be allowed to make, is I am an American. But the moment you say you're a Zionist, you've subordinated what's best for America to this ideology. So we've created these monsters, but now the monsters control us. So we have this trifecta of terror with America at the top, anchored by Ukraine and Israel. And we have now just defined what is the problem in the world today. Because if you eliminate the United States, Israel, and Ukraine, there are no problems in the world anymore. I mean, literally, they're done. Everything else can be resolved. I mean, I guess you have India, Pakistan, but they can talk. You have China, India, but they can talk. China, Taiwan, it's amazing when you take America out of the mix, how important diplomacy becomes. But when you inject America into the mix, it's the military solution. I think we've identified what the problem in the world today is. It's spelled USA.
You know, here's something I want to ask you, throw at you. Here's an article. Russia could ban export of vital resources to the West, according to the deputy prime minister. They include a large list of products that are in high demand on global markets. And if you read down, you find that this possibility was first voiced by Russian President Vladimir Putin earlier this month. So now it appears to me that the Russians are going to get serious economically. That, a while back, there was some question, what would you do if you were Russia and they fired missiles and this and that? I said, I'd do what I've always felt is the worst thing you can do to people, give them what they want. It's always the worst possible thing. And I'd say to Europe, so you guys are doing everything you can to sanction us, and you want to stop getting oil, you want to stop getting gas and fertilizer and things like that, time to give you what you want. I think Russia is still either number 1 or 2 in gas, in fertilizer, in oil. And all of this anti-Russia stuff, they're still buying a hell of a lot of very important stuff that they could not survive in Europe without Russia. And if I was Russia, I'd say, you guys are trying to destroy me. You get none of that anymore. Oh, by the way, Boeing and Airbus building all those planes, good luck with titanium. Aluminum, well, the market for aluminum ain't going to look so good anymore. And I would say, if you guys are coming to get me, fine. I would say, they've got 1 million sanctions against Russia. If I'm running Russia and it looks like Putin's getting there, that he's going to say, look, all of this stuff. And imagine what happens to the price of these things on the market. And the Russians can say, oh, by the way, we'll still sell them to China at the same price. India, Africa, our friend, they all get them at the same price. Europe, the U.S., uranium, oh, by the way, Russia's got 40% of the uranium, and they're very good friends with Niger and Mali and the African countries that have a significant amount. So it looks like the time is getting close when countries who have a significant influence on the world and global commodities market are going to make a move. And if Russia makes it, it just wouldn't shock me if China doesn't say, oh, yeah, some of these rare earth minerals. The time's coming when the U.S. is going to be slammed head on into the sanctions that it's been imposing on everyone else. And I think it looks like that's coming. Your thoughts on all of that, Scott?
The interesting, I had a debate in another journalistic outlet that I participate in that dealt with oil. And basically the question to be addressed in the debate is about the Russian weaponization of oil, especially with Europe. And my opponent saying you can't do business with Russia because it's not a reliable supplier, that they weaponize it, that at the first possibility they'll cut off oil and all that stuff. And I wrote back and I said, no, Russia is the reason why Russia is one of the world's largest suppliers of energy is because it's a good client, a good customer. I mean, they deliver on their contracts. If Russia signs a contract, Russia adheres to the contract through hell or high water, because that's what a reliable business partner does. And Russia's always examined this not from the how do I screw Europe or America, but how do I retain my standing in the global business community? And so for everybody is like, well, why does Russia still sell oil to Europe? Especially when Europe's saying we don't want any oil, but they do want it because they have to have it. They need it. Russia sells it for a number of reasons. One, it's a stream of income. But two, imagine if you're not Europe. Imagine if you're India or the Chinese. And your relations with Russia are good, but they're not perfect. There's things you have issues of. And now you've made Russia an important part of your economy. Russian energy, an important part of your economy. And that doesn't matter how much justification Russia can say. Well, we were justified to end this contract, to modify this contractual relationship. From an Indian perspective, you have to say, well, we can't predict the future. And Russia just showed that under certain conditions, these contracts are meaningless. That's bad for Russian business. So I think the Russians bend over backwards to say, we know, I mean, they are shipping ammonia fertilizer through Ukraine. They are transshipping oil through Ukraine. Ukraine gets paid billions of dollars by the Russians. Why? Because contractually Russia is obligated to fulfill its commitments. And when you sign contracts, they're for multi-years. Just because a war comes up, you don't, it doesn't. First of all, no war has been declared. See, this is the other thing. If a war was declared, then I think we get the force majeure and all this kind of stuff that gets to kick in and the contracts are nullified. But Russia made it a point. Not everybody's like, why didn't Russia declare war? I think I just answered it for you. Because they have contracts that are important. And the contracts are important on the number of playing levels, economically, reputationally, to secure market share as the rest of the world collapses. I think what Russia has done in adhering to its contractual obligations is raise its stature in the world today. There's a reason why Africa is flocking to do business with Russia, because Russia can be trusted. And Russia doesn't go around and sanction you because you disagree with a policy that has nothing to do with your country or the region. I think when you take a look at the sale of nickel and titanium and stuff, I think one of the reasons why it's taken so long is these contracts, and I have to look into this, may be coming up for renegotiation. And at that time, Russia can say, no, we don't want to renegotiate this contract. But Russia has always been very careful about arbitrarily terminating contracts, because then they're as guilty as the United States is in terms of sanctioning and seizing assets, maybe not on the scope and scale, but basically what you're saying is that your word is not your bond, that your word means nothing, that a contract means nothing. Russia is all about treaty relationships, contractual relationships. They want it in writing. They want it down, what your obligations are. The United States has shown that it can't be reliable. This is why another big news that came out this week that nobody's picking up on is Russia said no more arms control discussions with the United States.
Right.
We can't trust you. There's nothing there's nothing you can say that would make us want to do business with you. You're horrible. You violated every treaty. You lied to everybody. You lied to everybody. You remember Michael McFaul when he
yes,
when he
I do.
on that stage, and I forget, was it Mearsheimer that confronted him?
I think
So you lied.
Montreal.
Of course we lied. We're big boys, big boy rules. We lie. No, we don't, Michael. It's not the way it's supposed to be, especially diplomats. Diplomats have to tell the truth all the time. The CIA can lie because they're scum-sucking pigs, but the diplomats, your word is your bond. You represent America. You don't have to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. In diplomacy, you're allowed to, not answer a question. You don't have to answer that question, or you can say, "I'll get back to you," or you can say, "This is under consideration." There's a whole bunch of terms out there that you can throw out there to cloud the situation without lying. But when you commit, especially the final product of diplomacy, which is a contract, a treaty, signed, ratified, America has put its weight behind this. And then it turns out that it was all a lie, a ploy. There's a reason why the world doesn't trust us, because we can't be trusted. We stand for nothing, literally nothing. I challenge any God-fearing, patriotic American right now to actually, in a straight face, tell me what America stands for today. What makes you proud of being an American? Right now. I ask myself that question every single day. The only thing that makes me proud of being an American is the potential of what America could be. But there's nothing about what America does today that makes me proud. Nothing. From how we treat our own people, how we treat our own Constitution, how we interface with the world. There's not a single damn thing that makes me proud of being an American, because we suck. We don't care about ourselves. We don't care about our Constitution. We don't care about the world we live in. I mean, when I say ourselves, we only care about ourselves. We don't care about our fellow Americans. We are abandoning people in need, just like we abandoned them in Hawaii. And every American has to wake up right now and ask themselves, if the world came to an end in my neighborhood, who's going to come to my assistance? And the answer is nobody. They'll give you $750. Yeehaw.
Yeah, that's a fact. Let me ask you this. A town I've been hearing about a lot, Vuhledar. Vuhledar. I can never look at the spelling and what have the W's mean the V's and U. I don't know what the hell. All I know is there's a town that kind of looks like either Vuhledar or Vuhledar, and it seems to have fallen. And it seems to me that that is a critical piece of the Ukrainian front line of defense. Your thoughts on whether or not it's fallen and how important that is, the rate of decline for the Ukraine, how it affects the fall of the Ukrainian defense, which seems to be crumbling.
Well, first of all, Vuhledar, I could mispronounce it just like anybody. And there's a Russian pronunciation, then there's a Ukrainian pronunciation. It is a small urban entity that is located on the battlefield in the Zaporizhia area. As Russia came in the early stages of this conflict, and one of the first things they did is create that land corridor connecting Crimea with the Donbass and Russia. You needed that land corridor to be created. The land corridor, then once it's created, needed to expand. And ideally, it would expand to include all of Zaporizhia, all of Kherson. As the Russians expanded out of Mariupol and moved to the west, Vuhledar was one of the places that they tried to take early on. And you take it, it was an anchor of the Ukrainian defenses in that area. If you take it, the Ukrainians would have to withdraw back further. The Ukrainians held. And I mean, if I'm writing the history of the Ukrainian side of the war, the defense of Vuhledar will go down as one of the classics. I mean, these guys held. They were bombed to death. They were shelled to death. The Russians put a lot of resources into this. They beat back tremendous amount of Russian attacks, inflicted serious casualties on the Russians over time. This was became the anchor of their defense. And basically, as long as Vuhledar held, it made things difficult for the Russians in the Zaporizhia front, and also dictated what Russia could do further, because you always have to think about flank protection, logistics, and things of that nature. So the continued defense of this place became strategic in nature. I know there's a lot of people now that are reinventing history, saying, well, it doesn't matter, it's just a small little village. I mean, if you looked at, let me give you an example from history. The Battle of Waterloo. Okay, Napoleon is going up against Wellington, and he's making the moves. He needs to secure a flank position so he can launch his major attack. There's a farmhouse that's being held by a handful of British riflemen, and he needs to clear that farmhouse so that he can then move forward aggressively against it. Couldn't take the farmhouse. I mean, they took it at the end of the day, but what should have been just a preparatory movement or battle for the big battle became a major focus of effort as the entire French assault stalled, and now they have to launch attack against this farmhouse. And finally, they took the farmhouse, but it's late in the day. They've blown their momentum, etc. Vuhledar is this farmhouse. Vuhledar was this farmhouse. It was you can't pretend it. If you looked at the battlefield before it happened, you'd say that's just a farmhouse. But as the battle unfolded, La Haye Sainte, I think, is the name of the place. I used to study that battle all the time, but it became a critical aspect of the battle for Waterloo, and the reason why Napoleon lost. Vuhledar took on that kind of importance for the Ukrainians. It fell, I think, in a way that isn't going to disrupt the Russians. Meaning the Russians have the resources. This isn't the Waterloo analogy fails at this point because Russia does have the resources to continue and move on, and they will. it's going to be problematic for the Ukrainians because now with the collapse of this, what's behind it? Where the Ukrainians going to fall back on? And it creates, a level of uncertainty and a level of fluidity. I mean, it held for so long; it was just assumed it was going to hold, and now it didn't. This battle has major consequences. Now, going forward, people will stop talking about this battle, but understand that Uladar has anchored the Ukrainian defenses in Zaporizhia for 2 years, and when Russia takes Zaporizhia, and Russia will recapture all of Zaporizhia. The only reason why I was able to do so is because Uladar fell. I mean, that's how Uladar was the linchpin of the Ukrainian defense of Zaporizhia.
Interesting. Wow. Well, let me throw, here's another article. This is from TASS. Beijing, Moscow to promote just multipolar world order. And when you go on, and they're like, China and Russia will continue to fight for international justice, contribute to building a multipolar world. You go down, and they say China and Russia supported each other's presidency in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS. China and Russia will continue to actively lead the trend for independence and mutually beneficial cooperation. He emphasized both. Okay, so he goes on. We will firmly promote the victorious achievements of World War II and work together to facilitate the shaping of the right view of its history. Very interesting thing going on there. It's I read recently that they had this big Ocean 24, which was a large naval exercise. China and Russia both participated. Afterwards, China and Russia started naval patrols together, so they're doing naval patrols together. It just seems to me that China and Russia are rapidly integrating their military resources. I'll leave it at that. And with Iran being on the verge of being possibly attacked, I had heard that Shoigu, who was nobody could find, might just be in Iran. And it seems to me that in light of the United States stacking the Ukraine with military hardware and technology and space-based targeting assets and intelligence against Russia, that don't get me wrong, I'm not denigrating Iran's ability, but that Russia would likely be of great assistance to Iran in the event of some kind of a clash. Anyway, your thoughts: Iran, Russia, China.
Well, let's look at two things. In World War II, we had the Allies and we had the Axis. The Allies were defined by the United States, Soviet Union, Great Britain, China, France. Those are the big ones. The Axis was Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy. We, being the United States, we focus on the war in Europe. D-Day is one of our big things that we talk about. We all watch the movie Patton, so we understand North Africa and Sicily, and to a lesser extent Italy, because Patton never went into Italy. So we ignore the horrors that was, the landing in Naples, Anzio, Casino, and just the bloody fighting that was done there. But we romanticize that aspect of it. When it comes to the Pacific, it's Pearl Harbor. We always start with Pearl Harbor. We talk a little bit about MacArthur running away. Then we have Guadalcanal. Then we have the island hopping. We finish up with Iwo Jima, the flag raising, Okinawa, and then of course Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the war's over. Sometimes we'll have people talk about Merrill's Marauders. We'll say, well, wait, where were they? They were in Burma. What were they doing in Burma? They're trying to do that Burma-China road. Well, why are we doing that Burma-China road? What China? Huh? And then we'll get into, the Chenault and the what the heck did they call them? The Tigers, the P-40s with the tiger face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talk about that, but even then, we're talking about later in the war. We forget that, from 1936, I think that's when the Manchurian Bridge incident took place. On China was at war with Japan, and Japan brutally occupied China. The massacre of Nanking, what they did in Shanghai, the slaughter, the use of biological weapons to annihilate the Chinese. I mean, the Japanese were pure evil in the minds of the Chinese. Unforgivable acts were committed by the Japanese. Slaughter, butchering, millions of people dying. Then the war ends. Now, and you're also the Soviets. Remember, the Nazi Germans killed all those Soviet people and, butchered and raped and murdered and all that. War ends. In America, we make good with the Nazis, the Germans. They become part of our NATO alliance. And we make good with the Japanese, especially during the Korean War. We suddenly realized the strategic importance of Japan, and the occupation forces turned into forces that had to be deployed into Korea. We need to turn Japan into a military base. We need to make good with Japanese. And meanwhile, the Chinese are going, these guys are evil. They didn't change. You left the emperor in place. And now you've allowed all of those industrial companies that were making the weapons that made the Japanese war machine to exist and thrive as under your umbrella. And the same thing, the Russians are looking at the Germans going, wait a minute, these guys committed crimes, and yet you've embraced them and absorbed them and make them one of yours. There's a reason why history matters to the Russians and the Chinese, because they don't want to ever forget the reality that Germany and Japan are in many ways unrepentant. How can I say that? Look at the new prime minister of Japan. He's a warmongering sack of manure. This is a man who believes in the revival of the Japanese empire. He wants the Japanese military to forego its constitutional, restraints about war. He wants the fleet and the rising sun to rise again. And China's going, no, no, and no. We don't forget our history. We know who you are, and you've never apologized. You've never got on your knees. You've never begged for forgiveness, because America always protected you. The same thing with the Germans. I don't know how sick I was in my stomach when I watched those two German officers get up on TV with the map of Kursk and talk about this is the second time the German tanks have been in the Kursk area. Yeah, remember the first time you got wiped out. But now gleefully you get to do it again. Working with the same people, by the way, Ukrainian nationalists who fought on alongside Nazi Germany. The Russians and the Chinese don't forget their history. They know their history. We in the West tend to poo-poo it as propaganda. Not just Russian propaganda, it's just Chinese propaganda. Well, ask the Chinese. There's a whole bunch of them. Ask them. They might tell you otherwise. They might tell you that they haven't forgiven, they haven't forgotten, and they're not going to. So this is why I think you see both China and Russia talking about the importance of the history. Never forget the lessons of history. And they understand the danger that exists when the United States coddles an unrepentant Japan, when the United States coddles an unrepentant Germany. And, with Germany, we see the German tanks in Kursk today, and the Germans bragging about it. With Japan, we see them wanting to make their fleet relevant. Japanese ships going through the Strait of Formosa. I use that term on purpose to invoke the Japanese occupation of Formosa. Guys, this isn't good. This isn't good. We're heading in the wrong direction. And so the Russians and the Chinese understand this, and they're coming together. And if they do actually come together in a formal military alliance, it's game, set, match. Now, they're unlikely to, because there are problems associated with that, problems of history, problems, et cetera. But that, I think we need to, focus on that aspect of it. You had asked a part two to that question. I got so carried away with the
about
history.
Iran and Russia.
Russia and Iran,
S-400s, etc. And let me add this: the Iran, as we're hearing all of this, Iranian strikes and Israeli strikes. Man, if there's S-400s around, you don't want to go flying into Iran with those things around. You're going to get shot down.
Well, the S-400 isn't a perfect system, but it's a good system. It complicates Israeli strike plans, which were previously only focused on S-300 or S-300 equivalents. But here's the more important thing. Russia, in deploying the S-400, these aren't going to be operated by Iranians. They'll be plugged into the Iranian air defense, but now that means that Russia has now to get plugged into the Iranian air defense, and Russian operators are on the ground because they have to train the Iranians. Russia, my understanding, has sent Su-35s to Iran. Iranian pilots are not competent in the Su-35. Russian pilots are. If you go back in history,
Add electronic warfare systems too.
Advanced electronic warfare systems. If you go back in history, during the Korean War, Russian pilots flew Chinese and North Korean MiGs. During the Vietnam War, Russian operators were on the ground operating the SA-2 surface-to-air missile systems, and they were flying the North Vietnamese MiGs. Not all of them, but they were flying some. The MiG-21s when they were first introduced. You go to the Yom Kippur War, the War of Attrition. Russian pilots were flying the MiG-21s in the Egyptian Air Force. Throughout history, we see where Russia has sent its forces over. So it's not unthinkable that Russian pilots will be flying Iranian aircraft in the defense of Iran, which means Israel, if it attacks Iran, will be fighting Russians. We saw today Israel launch an attack against a warehouse that was adjacent to the Russian military base in Syria. Early reports said that they had attacked the Russian military base, but I don't think they did. I think they attacked a warehouse outside of it. But Russian air defense did engage in the defense, because you can't, when missiles are coming in that close, you shoot down those that you deem to be a threat to you. This is a signal by Israel that they're not intimidated by Russia. Vladimir Putin has responded by telling all Russians to leave Israel. There's 1.5 million of them. He said, get out. Why? Lavrov said a little while ago that that Russia is not going to sit on the sidelines as Israel carries out genocide and destabilization. Russia has a historic relationship with Israel because significant number of Russian Jews and Ukrainian Jews back in the Soviet times have gone to Israel, and they maintain connectivity with their their relatives who remain behind. And so there's been a close consultation historically between Russia and Israel. But as the Russian UN ambassador said the other day in the Security Council, Israel has become completely intertwined with America. There's no distinguishing the two. And if America is the adversary, so too shall Israel become. And I think Israel is about to find out that in expanding the scope and scale of this conflict in the Middle East, they're going to run head on into Russia. And this will be interesting to see what happens, because it's one thing to have Israel planning an F-15I or an F-35 incursion into Iranian airspace against Iranian pilots flying old F-14s or MiG-29s or things of that nature. It's another thing when you have the Russians bringing their skill set to bear, and what happens when these Israeli aircraft run into Su-35s flown by Russians, directed by Russians, protected by a Russian air defense umbrella. We'll see. But we're moving into a very dangerous phase here, where we could see a Russian-Israeli clash turn into a Russian-American clash, with all that entails. And so, I've been focused, like many others, on Ukraine as the potential flashpoint for, a nuclear Armageddon. But thanks to Israel, we now see the potential for an Israeli-Iranian conflict to spin out of control and become a Russian-American conflict. But even the Israeli-Iranian conflict, I had a conversation with an Iranian, not in the government, but in the know. And I said, from my perspective, the fatwa issued by Ayatollah Khomeini and backed by Khamenei, that nuclear weapons are forbidden under Islam, still exists. But I said studying, Iranian marja and studying the way the Shia faith works and how as you become an Ayatollah and you create your marja, you're one of the things you have to do is publish your interpretation of a religious notion, how it's impacted by modern times. And the whole concept of the Shia faith is that it adapts to the present reality. For instance, there's technologies today that didn't exist back when Muhammad walked the earth, and so Muhammad's words don't directly apply. So therefore, how do you apply the principles of Muhammad to modern times? And the thing about the marja is that it's sort of democratic based, meaning if you're an Ayatollah and you create your marja and you come up with something to say, women can only wear 15 layers of black woolen clothing in the summer. And the Iranian people go, no, they just don't attend that marja. They go to the guy that says, the hijab can, they go, okay, we'll buy into this one. And now you wilt, and then the theocracy goes, you failed. You were given your shot. You failed. The reason why I bring this up is if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear infrastructure, understand this, it won't destroy it. A significant element, the most critical elements, are buried deep underground and they are duplicated. These are the elements that can take 60% enriched uranium and turn it into 98% enriched uranium in a very, very short period of time. I believe it's also hidden in underground is the ability to turn that enriched uranium into metal, shape that metal, and use it as the fissile core of a nuclear device. A nuclear device which has been designed from the get-go to fit on the missiles that can hit Israel anytime they want to, anywhere they want to. Israel has talked about, maybe using nuclear weapons as part of the Samson option. If Israel gets into a direct existential conflict, because if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear infrastructure, it's now said this is a life and death struggle with Iran. Iran, I believe there will be a new fatwa issued. They won't go public with it, but the supreme leader will say, go forth. And I think in 2 weeks' time, they'll have 5 nuclear weapons loaded on Fatah 1, Fatah 2 missiles. And 5's all you need to eliminate Israel forever. There will be no Israel left. That's the direction we're heading here.
That's a fact.
That's literally the direction we're heading here. So for everybody who's out there cheering Israel on, understand this, you're simply cheering the total destruction of Israel. Israel's not going to win this war. That's the reality. They're not going to win it conventionally, and they're not going to win it by threatening nuclear conflict. Nuclear war will be the end of Israel. Now, that doesn't mean that Israel isn't going to hurt a whole bunch of other people. Of course they will. But it'll be the end of Israel. And for those of you who say, I stand with Israel, please go stand with them physically so that we're done with you too. Because that's what the outcome will be. This is a very dangerous period of time that we all live in. And we should take nothing for granted, especially our government, which has shown under the Biden administration a total inability to appreciate this because it has been so thoroughly infiltrated with Ukrainian nationalists and pro-Israeli Zionists that it no longer functions in a manner that preserves and protects America, what America is.
And I'll say this, add this to it. One of the things the Iranians have threatened to do is strike the Israeli infrastructure. If you understand Israel, you take out a couple of electric and water, it's not a big country. Doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, right? Iran could take out, without large massacres, without some huge exchange, just with very targeted, precisely targeted strikes, could really do what the U.S. always threatens to do. We'll bomb you back to the Stone Age. Fact of the matter is this: if they say we're taking out certain number of electric, water, etc., they would eliminate Israel's ability to really continue any war at all, continue anything at all. The people in Israel would say, holy crap, we got no electricity. How long is it going to take to rebuild this or that or whatever? Well, we can maybe do it in a year or two, provided that Iran doesn't blow those back up as soon as we get started working. You know what I'm saying? Number one. Number two, Iran has the ability to eliminate the oil infrastructure in the region, which would put us back to the Stone Age. So for all of the talk about putting people back to the Stone Age that the U.S. has been doing in a relatively brief amount of time, without catastrophic human loss, Iran has the capability to put Israel and the entire West back to the Stone Age. And I think that's something that people don't really grasp.
Ask yourself this. For instance, Russia's been hitting Ukraine's energy production infrastructure. And Ukraine has responded by receiving equipment to rebuild, but also its neighbors in Europe have been providing electricity to Ukraine. Now, some of them are starting to shut it off because they say they need it. Which of Israel's neighbors are going to divert their energy grid to Israel? No one. So this is what the Israelis have to understand. You can't posture as if you're a superpower when the foundation you're standing on is made out of balsa wood. And the Iranians have said infrastructure. I mean, that's what they focused on. Their next step wasn't to terrorize the Israeli population or to take out the government. The Iranians are so much smarter than we give them credit for, and they're so much more sophisticated than we give them credit for. By targeting Israeli infrastructure, they will in effect kill Israel. And they'll do it without killing Israelis. Once Israel becomes incompatible with modern life, millions of Israelis will flee that country. And when you drop demographically, when you drop the number of Israelis down from 9 million to say 5 million, down to 4 million, the concept of a Jewish homeland is no longer viable because the percentages, it doesn't work anymore. So, and the interesting thing about Iran is they didn't choose to do that. They're giving Israel a chance, which means Iran's ultimate goal isn't the death of Israel. Iran's ultimate goal is peace and stability, inclusive of Israel. But they'd like to see a Palestinian state. Things of that nature. But this concept that the Ayatollah wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, if that's what he wanted, he would have done it. Israel wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth because ultimately, if that decision's made, it's going to be because the Israeli government provoked it, knowing what the consequences of it would be. No one can say the Israeli government hasn't been put on notice as what will happen if they go forward.
Scott Ritter. Don't forget, everybody, go to scottritter.com.
Cultfigga. Follow me.